Let's start this session. Okay. As I said earlier, please stop me if you're not clear with any terminology or anything which you wanted to get clarity. So, as mentioned, right? So, I'm a qualified security assessor. I'm with one of the organization called Control Case from 2016. I have total 17 years of experience. I worked in multiple organization, wherein the major one is Wipro, AT&T, and Microland. So from last 7 years, I'm with this particular domain, PCI DSS. I do the RBI audits. I do the SWIFT, GDPR audits as well, right? So as I enrolled with this group, so I just thought to, someone has asked that if anyone is from PCI domain and they wanted to share some knowledge, right? So I just wanted to share my knowledge to you guys. This is, if you see that this is what I have mentioned, this is a awareness and implementer training, right? So it's not only that I just wanted you to aware that what are the terminology. It is also that when if you encounter with this particular domain, from the implementation side or being a consultant, if someone asks something related to the PCI DSS implementation, although it is just a 8 hours training, I will not be able to the whole PCI DSS to explain you, but I'll try to explain the major part, right, which will help you to explain if any of your customer or the internal organization when they are going to implement PCI DSS, right? So let me just set up the agenda. So as this is a 2 days training, 10 to 2 Indian time which we are dealing with. So the first thing first, as a lot of people has mentioned over there that PCI is something new for them, right? So first we'll go ahead with what is PCI, right? And then see, PCI and PCI DSS both are different. So we have to understand what is PCI and what is PCI DSS, why and where the PCI DSS applicability happens, and how do we define the scope, right? The fourth, which will be like assessment methodology, how the QSA perform the assessment. And here, the the next day, I mean tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I will touch base of the basic payment industry terminologies. I will touch base the requirement understanding and intent. And there is a new version of PCI which is coming, 4.0. So I will just discuss about the transition timeline and summary about it. Right. I hope agenda is clear to everyone.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Right. Great. So see what happened is in earlier days, right? So as I said that what is PCI? So let's discuss why and when this PCI comes into a picture, right? So in earlier days, what were happening is that now if any entity they wanted to do their business with any of the card business, right? So let's say entity A wants to do business into e-commerce, right? So they dealt with a Visa. So, okay, fine. After 1 year or 2 years, they wanted to do business with Master as well, right? So, what were happening is that no Visa were coming with their own security principles that, okay, these are the 10, 15 rules which you have to follow, or you can say these are the standards which were from the Visa. And then Master came with their own, MX came with their own, Discover come with their own. So one entity, if they wanted to do business with all the five payment brands, which were the major one, in last year they have added the China Union Pay as well in PCI. But I will talk about those major five, which is Visa, Master, MX, Discover, and JCB. So any entity, let's say if it is a bank, right? So they wanted to produce these five cards. So they have to go for each and every time their audit, right? So what happened is that started people started asking question to Visa and Master that what if I follow the Visa standard, whether I will be able to meet the Mastercard guidelines, whether I will be able to meet the MX guideline. So what happened, these all the major players, right, these five payment brands, what they did, right, they came together and then they make one PCI SSC council, right? Which is PCI is Payment Card Industry, SSC is Security Standard Council. So what happened that they built, they formed this council in 2006, and what they did that, okay, if you wanted to do business in card industry, regardless which payment brand you are going for, if you are opting this PCI standard, right, then you don't have to go for Visa separate, Master separate, MX separate, right? So one standard, if you follow, you will meet all the five payment brand guidelines, right? So that is where this PCI SSC came into a picture in 2006. Now, what were the responsibility of SSC? Individual entity, right? These are not the payment brands. These were the major players were the payment brand, but they cannot dictate in terms of, that if you won't certify, I will penalize you, I will fine you, or something like that, right? So their main responsibility was to develop, manage, educate, and aware. What? The question is what? Developing what? Managing what? Education on what? Right? So what actually they said that we are not going to deal with only one standard, right? There are multiple standard. If you see the PCI family, right? So they have a one big family. If you see what I have mentioned in my intro, right, that I'm a PCI QSA, I'm a card production QSA. So what they did, they have built a family, right? So PCI has the PCI DSS, PADSS, they have a PCI pin, they have a PCI PTS, they have a card production, right? So the whole standards, they all came under the umbrella of PCI SSC, right? And there the council responsibility was to develop the standards which are meeting the industry best practices, right? Which are meeting the new threats which is coming to the card industry. They wanted to educate people that okay, this is something which is coming to the industry and how we are going to secure ourselves, right? And that is the, for those points only, they wanted to spread the awareness. Clear? So this is where this PCI Council came into a picture to support those businesses who were dealing with the card brands. Any question, anyone over here? What is PCI? Why it came into existence?
Ashish, thank you.
Yes.
Can you little elaborate like Visa card, Mastercard, American? So like you have stated, there were various standards and all that.
Right.
So because I am totally new to this, so if you can like help us like a little more explanation what the standards were and how like they were interacting with each other or what was the conflict, why this requirement come up and all that. A
Right.
small,
So great, great. So
yeah.
let's take an example. So actually, these are not known to the normal industry people, right? Because this was more into the card business, right? So if I'm from the information security, but I'm not dealing with any card business, right, or any entity who are dealing with a card, so I'm not known to that what Visa standards, right? So what happens? So let me put into this way. So every country has their own central bank, right? Like we have a RBI in India. So every country, like in Saudi Arabia, they have a sama, in Bangladesh they have a NPSP, in Malaysia they have a called I forget the name, but every country has their central bank, right? So what happens that if I want to open a business, let's say I'm a merchant, right? I wanted to open a business that, okay, I will give you the SIM card. What you can do, you can come to me, just give me your card, I will swap it and I'll give you the SIM card, right? So what happens that I'm dealing with the card numbers. Now I have to secure those card numbers, right? So in earlier days, if I wanted to use a Visa card, right? So what happens? Visa comes and they will do the audit, right? So they had their own standard. It is not very much spread into the industry. So they had certain checklists that they have to follow. That okay, if you are using a Visa card, then you have to encrypt in this way. You cannot transmit in this way. So they had certain checklist. Now, if I wanted to expand my business and I say that okay, now I earlier I was only accepting the Visa card. Now I will accept the Mastercard as well. So now MasterCard will come with their own checklist because they will not follow the visa guideline. Like if you are a visa certified, then I will also accept that. No, it's not like that. They were all having their own method of audit. They had their own checklist, right? Same way if it is, if go to the bank, right? So let's say I wanted to produce a card. So being a bank, I'm a issuer basically, right? Issuer, I will also discuss, if you see my agenda. So here the basic payment industry terminology. Tomorrow I'm going to cover that what is issuer, what is merchant, what is acquirer, because these terminology you will listen very frequently if it is PCI DSS, right? So when it comes to the MasterCard, so nowadays if you see that, if you go to the SDFC, if you go to the any other nationalized bank, so you get a either Rupee card, you get either or Visa card or MasterCard, right? So those were the days where Visa comes to the bank and they do their own checklist, they have their own audit terminology. It is not that industry known standard. They had their own standard and you have to follow that, right? Even for the card production, even for the card issuance, even for the authorization and acquiring. So I'm sure that these are the terminology which I'm using. You will be confused at what he's talking about, the authorization and acquiring and all. Tomorrow we'll discuss everything in detail. Now, this PCI, when they came into existence, so they have come up with one standard, which we are going to discuss the whole PCI DSS, right? So PCI is payment card industry and DSS is data security standard. So any entity who are dealing with the data, when I say dealing, I will explain this in the further slide, what exactly the mean of dealing, right? So if they are following these PCI DSS guidelines, so Visa will say, hey, you're dealing with a card business. Are you PCI certified? They will say, yes, I'm PCI certified. So Visa will not come and do their further audit, right? Based on that certificate which they get from PCI DSS, right? So they will say that, okay, fine. And on the PCI DSS, you will see all the logo of.
Excuse me, everyone. Please, everyone, to remain on the mute mode. If you are still not in, if you are still not in the mute mode, sorry, I have to then remove you from this meeting.
Jagbir ji, we can actually put them on mute rather than removing. We can do that if you see from that.
1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was talking about it. So let's say if as a entity, if I'm a PCI DSS certified, so Visa, Master, MX, or Discover or JCB, whatever business I'm doing with these payments brand, they will just say that, okay, if you're PCI DSS certified, then we will not audit you from our audit checklist or from our standard. So that is where this PCI DSS are very helpful for those organizations who are dealing with the card numbers. I hope I have answered your query, Jagbir Singh.
Yeah. Go. Thank you, Ashish.
Right. Then we'll move to the PCI DSS, right? So here the question is that I talked about right now, though, in PCI DSS umbrella there are multiple standard, right? So PCI DSS applies on which type of entity? Why only PCI DSS? Why it is not the card production? Why it is not the PADSS? Why it is not the PCI pin, right? Although this is for the next day, but here as we are focusing on PCI DSS, so we will just stick to here. So it says PCI DSS is a family of data security standard that are intended to secure the processing infrastructure. So here, if I highlight it, right? So just you have to understand this particular part, right? Processing infrastructure. So basically, this PCI DSS is a standard who certifies the infrastructure of the entity which are dealing with a card number. Clear? So here we are certifying what? The processing infrastructure or the payment department, not department, that is not a right word, the payment business infrastructure, right? Now here, if you see PCI DSS applies to any entity that, remember this process, store or transmit cardholder data. It is consistent global standard applies to the bank, to the merchant, service provider and gateways. PCI DSS applies to the international card, credit, debit, prepaid, or any card which is a co-branded. So one thing you need to understand, or probably let's say the Indian fellows who are here, right? They will ask that, what do you mean by this international card only? Right. So international card means actually here I'm talking about the co-branded card, which is with like Visa, Master, MX, Discover, and JCB. If it is a RuPay card, right, which is produced by the RBI or NPCI in very to be very precise. So RuPay is still not falling under the PCI. But if entity wants to follow the same standard even for the RuPay infrastructure. Again, just remember this point, right? That I'm talking about the infrastructure. So wherever the RuPay card is moving to their infrastructure, if they are also following the PCI DSS, that is good to have, but it is not mandatory. So mandate where you have a credit card, debit card, or prepaid card which is co-branded. So where, let's say if you have a card of Visa, credit, or Master debit, so those entity who has produced you this card or who has given you this card, or those banks, right, ideally they should be certified of with PCI DSS. Clear this?
Yes.
Great. So team,
Yeah,
again,
Ashish, I just
yes,
have a question here.
I love to hear these queries, right? If you guys will be totally silent, then probably, I'm not very much
Ashish,
interacting with you.
Ashish, am I audible, Sunil?
Yes, yes,
Am I audible, Sunil, this side? Actually, as you said, you mentioned that PCI DSS applies to any entity that processes, stores, and transmits. So, in this area, e-commerce sites and any site which is asking for credit card comes under in this, or only the card?
exactly. Yeah, they will.
So, do they have some set of rules how long they will keep our card data in their database, and it will be forever?
No. So we'll discuss this part, but again, to answer your queries, to suffice your query, because if we miss this query again, so see, what PCI says, first of all, if you need a card number, then only store. That is the basic thumb rule. You cannot store the card number just to ease of doing your business. That no, I want to keep this card so I can run my business. No, that is not the case over here. You have to tell them, to the auditor or to the assessor, that why do you need a card. So the e-commerce example which you took, let's take an example of Amazon. I have taken already this example to show you guys, so let's say you are doing a shopping with Amazon or Flipkart or any other shopping website. Even let's say you are using a Zomato, Swiggy, Food Panda, anything for even ordering your foods, right? So there is a multiple options, like you can make a payment through internet banking, through your wallet, through UPI, or through credit card and debit card, right? So when you enter those details, and if that entity is certified, so they have to declare that for what reason I need a card, and or any other detail, and what would be the retention period. To answer your query, to be very precise, they have to declare the retention period as well. So they cannot say that I will store this data forever, right? They have to show the business justification that okay, I want to keep this data for 1 day or 1 month or 1 year or 10 year, for so and so reason. I have a proper justification. Then the next question would be, okay, what if the retention period is over? So let's say you are declaring that I'm keeping the data for 1 day. So what you need to do next? The answer is, then you have to have a process in place for secure deleting those data, right? So one, business justification. Second, defined retention period. And third, securely delete those data which is completed the retention. Is this clear?
Ashish,
Yeah.
Ashish, I have one query. Practically, I have faced this. Like,
Yeah.
if we are doing some online shopping and all that,
Right.
maybe on any of the names which you have stated,
Right.
but many a time what I have observed, once you have entered your credit card details, so if
Right.
even you try to delete that, it say that this is the only one card that you have entered and you cannot delete. Either you
Right.
enter another card, then only you can delete the previous one.
Correct. Correct. Right. So
So
here,
why?
yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Please
Yeah.
complete your question. Yeah.
So why they are not allowing? Because let's say the user don't want, once he has done the shopping
Hmm.
and he want to remove his credit card from that. So either one way is totally remove the account, then he can do, or the company is not allowing to remove the credit card details.
Right. So ideally, there is an option of save the card. Right.
Hmm.
Now, when we say the save the card, so it has actually a business for that particular entity. Now, why they ask you to save the card? Again, it is up to the customer, right? Whether they want to save the card or not. Why do they want to save the card is for the recurring transactions, right? So what they say or what they put up as a business justification that I don't want my customer to put some of the details every time when they are coming for transactions, right? So when if you see that when you save the card, so next time what happens is you just need to enter the CVV part only, right? So that is what they show the as a justification that yes, for recurring payment. But again, Jagbir ji, it is totally on you. You want to add this card or not? They cannot force you to store the card. There is an option to delete that card as well, that although they will say this is your primary card, then the next question is that would you still like to delete it or keep it? So it is up to the customer, they want to keep it or they want to delete it. But as a
Okay.
entity, I mean as a merchant or as a e-commerce entity, I cannot force any of my client to store the card. And that is from I think there is a circular in 2020 from the RBI that they are now more strict to these entities, that not any XYZ entity can store the card. So they have a proper circular from the RBI, right? That and you won't believe in Indian market, a lot of entities are actually that during that time, a lot of chaos has happened, that how we will run our business. So they have come up with a new ideology, right? Where again the new business has come, that there are a lot of payment gateway has come. They say that okay, we are providing the tokenization services to you. Now to stick to your query, it is very much possible to delete those cards, and there is a no restrictions from the merchant or from the entity that you need to keep this card. They ask you to keep it for recurring transactions.
Okay. Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, I think someone also has raised the hand.
Good morning, sir. This is Pratap. Actually, I need a query. You have mentioned that earlier that co-branded card, like
Yes.
uh, they need PCIDSS. So, Rupee card is not co-branded. Actually, what is the term co-branded? Just to
So
clarify this.
okay, so co-branded is basically right now what they say is that the entity which is with PCI, right? So those five payment brands, now actually it is a six. So if you are dealing with a Visa, Master, MX, JCB, Discover, so these are the five payment brands with which they consider as an international card, and they will be only applicable for PCI DSS. Now from last year, I think September 2022, they have added China Union Pay as well, right? So if any entity who are dealing with a China Union Pay card, right, they should also go for PCI DSS. Right now RuPay is not part of it. So if you are only dealing with a RuPay card, unless until some regulatory is asking you to go for PCI DSS, you are not eligible to go for it.
Okay.
Pratap, I hope I answered your query.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, always welcome. uh,
Good morning, sir.
Hi,
Hello.
good morning.
Sir, I have a query regarding online transaction. There is a payment gateway, right?
Right.
Okay, they support the payment. So in this payment gateway can support the PCI DSS standard.
Yeah, they are very much, part of it. If you see here, basically the service provider and the gateway. So basically, I'm talking about the payment gateways over here. All right. So there are a lot of questions and yeah, yeah,
I
please.
have one question. Yeah, as you were saying when Jagdish were asked about the Amazon being not forcing to store the card, right? So, but nowadays the cookies are being storing the information. So, how do PCI DSS help it to remove the
Yeah,
information from
yeah.
the cookies? Yeah.
Great. So, Kiran, if you don't mind, shall I park this question because it will be too early to explain this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right, but please make a note of it. If I forget it, please tell me that I did not answer your query, and I'm really intentionally I'm just parking this question to answer, because if I answer, then you won't understand, basically, right? From technical point I can explain and you can understand, but from the PCI point of view I'll explain it later.
Yeah. I wanted to know more.
Please do not mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. No problem.
Ashish Yadav.
Hey, hi. Yes, sir.
Yes, one small query. So, during the process of the next 2 days, would you be even explaining to us, like on a credit card, there's a lot of information, right?
Yes.
Like for Amex, especially, like instead of putting the CVV, you're supposed to enter the 4-digit number. I mean, what is the?
Right.
You'll be covering all this, right?
Yes. All right. Yes.
We have one more participant. Mr. Ali, you have raised your hand, and please ask your query quickly so that we can move further.
Yeah, thank you, Jagbir. Hi, Ashish.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Here's the scenario. I have created multiple e-commerce businesses, and when I was doing that, I used to use Shopify, WordPress, and all those stuff. Then I used to use the payment gateway option in there. So when I create those e-commerce businesses, do I really need to be certified for PCI DSS or the payment gateway? They will take care of that. And what about the moms and pops shop, like the retail shops?
Very good question. Allow me 10 minutes to answer this, but it doesn't mean I'll stop my session. I'll continue and then you will get your answers. Mahesh ji, do you have any question? I think you have raised your hand.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the session. So my question, sir, in digital era, we are going to get lots of virtual currencies will be there. So
Correct.
what is the future perspective for this particular standards on the gateways or PCI DSS, which will be applicable in the virtual currencies and globally, or what do you think about it, sir? What do you suggest on the same?
Yeah, great question, Mahesh ji. Just give me 5 minutes. You all will get your answers, right? Because all are very interesting questions, and I'm really happy to have these questions, because this will make our session more interesting, right? So let us go to the further slides, right? Now here, the all interesting part will get start. Fine.
Yeah.
So see, PCI DSS applicability and scope. This is something which you need to understand very carefully, and this will answer a lot of queries. So here, what happens is that, the PCI DSS compliance applies to any entity that, please remember a short form, SPIT. Okay. Like we talk in ISO, right? The CIA, the triad, right? So here we have a triad called SPIT. Store, process, transmit. Any entity, and this is what I was also, I said that, when I use that, any entity who are dealing with a card. So dealing is basically the store, process, and transmit. So any entity who stores the data, or process the data, or transmit the data, or does all three, by default PCI applies on it. That is one thumb rule. The second thumb rule is, most of the country in the world, so there are some regulatory body who is forcing you to go for PCI DSS. So again, this is not a mandate one, but if you are storing, processing, and transmitting the cardholder data, and you are a PCI certified, then your business will be on another level, because that gives confidence to your customer or to your other B2B partners, right? Or to your acquirer that, okay, this particular entity is PCI certified. It means that they are following all the security best practices to secure the card data. I hope I'm clear with it, right? The store, process, and transmit.
Yeah.
Let me explain it one by one. So as Jagbir ji has taken an example of one of the e-commerce or any of the e-commerce, because I see people are from the other part of world as well over here, right? So let's take Amazon, because Amazon is worldwide known to everyone, right? So when there is an option to save the card, it means that entity is somewhere storing the card number, right? So
Yes.
it applies, the PCI DSS applies on on Amazon. When you enter the card number and when you hit enter, right? So you enter the card number, you enter CVV, your name, expiry, everything. So data will be moved from one location to another location. That is called transmission of the data, right? And the processing is, let's say you got a raw data. Along with the card numbers, there are other multiple data into it. You did the processing, you did all the fighting over here it, and then you move the card number at one place and another raw data at one place. It means that you process the data from one, means you get an input and output, you have given something else. So store, process, and transmit. Is it clear to everyone now?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Now, Aditya ji was, asking about that whether I will cover this. So this is the answer, right? So here, when you see the card numbers, right? So this 16 digit, if you see, these are the examples. In PCI term, we call it as a PAN, primary account number, right? You call it as a card number or primary account number, both are same. You also see that logo. So here, this payment brand logo like Master, Visa, Rupee, or China Union Pay, Discover, JCB. This is the NFC, which is, from last few years, it is very important. So it means that, you don't have to insert the card anywhere. It's just a dip and your transaction is enough, right? But here there are some limitations that, only 2000 or 5000 or 1000 transaction you can do. This is the one, this is called the chip data. Here, if you see, this is your expiry date. Here, if you see, your name will be there. And at the back end, see why I'm explaining you, this will be, this is actually going to be a very important to understand that what is allowed, what is not allowed. This black strip, they call it as a magnetic strip, okay, where lot of details are stored, which we as a normal person, as a common, we don't know about it, right? And this 3 digit in Master, Visa, and other cards, this is a 3, which we call it as a CVV2. And in MX, it will be on the front of the card, which is 4 digit, that is called CVV2, right? This is the signature label where you, make your signatures, right? Now, why I explained all this? To understand this particular point. This whole data from PCI terminology called account data. Okay. When I'm saying whole data means the all which I have explained over here, this is called account data. Now they have again bifurcated in 2 segments. One is cardholder data, another is sensitive authentication data. Here we call in the short form CHD, cardholder data. Here we call it as a SAD, sensitive authentication data. Now you'll understand why I have called this SAD. Okay, so it's a part of cardholder data. You can see this 16-digit card number, cardholder name, expiry, and service code. Here, sensitive authentication data is, you see magnetic stripe or this EMV chip or CAV, CBC, CBB2, CID. There are multiple people use multiple terminology, but it is talking about these three and the four, which is on the MX. And pin block. Have you ever heard about this pin track data CBB2? Have you heard about it? Normally what we call, can you just give me the 3 digit of the, it is written on the back side of it, right? Or the front 4 digit. There will be a lot of people who are not familiar with these terminology, the track data, pin and pin block or CBB2. This slide is clear to everyone because this is very important.
Sir, CVV and CVV2 is different or same one, sir?
It's a
CVV and
different.
CVV2.
See, if you go with the banking terminology, it's a different, right? But normally what we call it as a CVV data, right? So in bank, I'm not going to use those critical terminology which confuses everyone, right? So you can call it as a right now for CVV or CVV2, both are fine. But in banking terminology, it's a different.
Sir, what is this service code?
Okay, service code is something which is, related to the card, okay, which is having again at the back end of the card numbers. I'll explain you this why, this is related. When I say back end, right? So the card has a detail of something which, which is for the mapping of that card. They call it as a service code, right? This is a part of your cardholder data. So here, if you see,
actually, I basically where know the CVV code is the last 3 pin number.
This is called card verification value. So basically, so what happens is, if I put into a terminology if I put into the scenario, so what happened when you do the e-commerce transaction? So you enter the card number, you enter your expiry, you enter your name, right? So what you actually entered, you enter the identification, right? Now, whether that, when you do the transaction, authorization process is important, whether that card belongs to you or not. And this card verification value, which is CVV or CVV2, is part of the authorization. And if I go back over here, this is a part of your sensitive authentication data. And that is why, nowadays you get a call from the banks or something, right? Please do not share OTP or CVV numbers and all. There is a reason behind it. And the reason is this. So if you see, these are the, this is actually a snip from the standard, PCI DSS standard. So it says that this cardholder data, the sensitive authentication data. Here, if you see the...
Not audible.
I'm not audible?
No. Now you're audible. Previously you weren't audible.
You're audible,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. All right. So I was talking...
Yeah, Ashish, you are audible to all. If any participant is not able to hear, then seems the problem at their end. Yeah, Ashish, please continue.
Yeah. So here I was talking about the element which we discussed right now, like the card number, cardholder name, service code, and expiry, full track data, which is the magnetic stripe, CVV, and pin block. See here, why do we call it as a SAD? Because this is not allowed to store. So when you enter the CVV on e-commerce website, if the e-commerce channel if e-commerce organization is certified, they will not store your CVV data because it is not allowed at all. When you dip your card into ATM, right? So as a normal person, what I understand that, okay, I entered my card number, I entered my PIN, and then, if PIN I entered correctly, I get my money. If I don't enter correctly, it will say that, you have entered the wrong PIN. But what is the use of PIN over here? So basically the PIN is used for your authorization, your authentication part, right? At the back end of the bank, right? So what happens, when I'll take one example, when I joined this particular domain in 2016, till that time, I was like, okay, I used to think that, I use my SBI card, I insert into the SDFC ATM. I got a money from SDFC ATM, right? But how come they are actually deducting the amount from my SBI account? So how this whole, cycle happens. So when I joined this organization, then I understood that, the terminology which I use. So SBI, if you hold a card of, let's say HSBC, I'll take the international examples, right? So if I hold the card of HSBC, it means that HSBC has issued the card to me, right? So the terminology called issuer is HSBC. If I use my HSBC card into Standard Chartered ATM, now here what is happening when I put a card into Standard Chartered, see, Standard Chartered read my card and then they identify, hey, this is not my card, means this is not the Standard Chartered card, this is a card of HSBC. So at the back end, they will send this request to HSBC. HSBC verifies with the PIN, authorize everything, you get your money from Standard Chartered. So what happens? Your Standard Chartered becomes acquirer. So these are the terminology. Issuer, who issues the card. Now, Standard Chartered is also issuer, but not for you, for their client. So acquirer means who is giving you or who is acquiring the transaction on behalf of your issuer, called acquirer. Merchants can be your, let's say, the Airtel or Vodafone. Those are the merchants, right? Service providers are those entities who provide services to any entity on behalf of them. Payment gateways, so when we do the transaction and it goes to the any other payment gateway, right? And the payment gateway part is to authorize. Again, payment gateway doesn't authorize, it just pass through the data to the another entity, which is your issuer or acquirer. All these entities on any circumstances, they are not allowed to store this data. Entity can store these data, which is mentioned as a yes. But if you see the third column, what it says, render store data unreadable, means if you are storing this card number, you cannot store in readable format. And how will you see in last session when Jagbir has explained about the CIA, right? See, CIA is the backbone of all the standard, right? So here, what are we maintaining? Can anybody tell?
We are masking the card number.
Confidentiality.
No.
Confidentiality.
Exactly. So we are maintaining the confidentiality of the data, right? So one ma'am has asked the query that, how does this, is there any mapping with ISO? Ma'am, to be very honest with you, this is more into the technical side PCI DSS, right? But one thing is common is CIA. So here, the main focus to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the card data, right? There are certain things like the physical security, the encryption, policy and procedure, those are mapping. But here the main focus is on the card data. So I hope this point is clear to everyone. In this cardholder data, it is allowed to store, but if you are storing the card number, again, the point over here is that if you are storing the card number means full card number, then it must be into unreadable format using encryption or hashing or truncation. Now this, if you are storing, then you become, or the entity become non-compliant, and that is the why we QSA use this word as a SAD data. So if you store, you become SAD because you become non-compliant.
Ashish, a query. Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if as an audit perspective, if I were to check these things, so what do I check against what? I mean.
Yes, I'll come to that. Right.
Yeah.
So here, one thing, if you read very carefully, it says sensitive authentication data must not be stored after authorization, even it encrypted. So a lot of entity, they say that, I want to store it, I will encrypt it. And that is your requirement that, data should not be in readable format. But here it says that after authorization. So can anybody tell me what is after authorization? Or let me actually explain. I'll not ask these questions, right? So let me explain. So just now, ma'am has asked about one thing, that data is storing in cookies and all, right? So what happened? You just think from the from our background of just 1 second. Okay, so as I said that the data is not allowed to store after authorization even if it encrypted. So what happens is that, let's say we are doing a transaction, e-commerce transaction, right? So what happened is that we enter the card number, we enter the CVV. Now the process, till this process is happening, so you entered all the data, so it takes, let's say, even few seconds or 5 seconds, 10 seconds to complete this the whole process, right? So during that time, the data will remain in your cookies or in your memory, correct? Once the authorization is done, you get a pop-up that yes, transaction successful, your orders are placed. Now entity has to ensure the application which they are using, that data must be deleted from the cookies or memory. And that is what we check during our audit. We ask the application, we ask the vendor to show this whole process into their environment of UAT. Basically, we check every time on the production. But let's say if the entity is not able to show the data into the production, so they will show us the code from the production, and then they will replicate the same into their UAT environment. And if any transaction is happening real time, so basically they show us in the production environment that, see, this is the code, and this is where actually we get assurance that yes, after the authorization, this whole entries of the SAT data will get deleted. Now here comes the point, whether that entity need the card number. So sometimes they say that we require the card number for our some other purpose of, let's say, any dispute is happening, or client is saying that I made a payment, but after some time it got the payment failed. So to check that particular dispute, we require the card number. So here the business requirements comes, right? Where they are declaring that for dispute purpose, I need to store the card number. So they will say that, okay, I want to store this card number into my database. Fine, you can store it. But how you are maintaining this? The question comes over here, because they are storing the card number. It means that they have to make sure the confidentiality of the data. So they will say, okay, so for this, we are having the application, application level encryption or database level encryption, right? Then we have to validate that how do they have set up an encryption, whether it is actually meeting the PCI parameters or not. Then the next question is what, which I explained earlier, retention period. See, this is where we actually, I just wanted to connect the dots. So I spoke those things earlier, right? So here when the entity says that no, after authorization, I'm deleting data, I need this data to be stored, then I will ask, okay, how does it, in making sure that this is secure? They will say I'm using an encryption. Then my next question is to them is that what is the retention period of it? They say that I want to keep this data for 6 months because of our internal process. Sometimes we require the data from last 4 months or 5 months as per our organization policy. So again, what I will check? I will check their policy, that what is written. If in their policy it is written only 3 months, but this particular business team is saying I want to keep this for the 6 months, then there is a red flag. That as per your organization policy, it is 3 months. Then they will say, no, for this particular business, I need to keep it for 6 months. Then my next point is that please update your policy. That is one. Second is, let's say they are declaring for 6 months. then my next question would be, what do you do after 6 months, right? Because their job is done after 6 months. They will updating the regular data. So let's say today I have updated the data. So it means that after 6 months, that data has to be deleted. Tomorrow I'm storing some data. After 6 months, that has to be deleted. It means they should have some process which securely deletes the data whenever they are storing it. Clear this point? Yeah.
Now for the primary account number, it says we have to store the data in unreadable per the requirement 3.4. Now when we go to the websites and when we pay some stuff, or sometimes we have pay for some services, you will find, does this mean when we notice only the last 4 digits are showing, the rest of the digits are like masked? Or shall it be like all the digits has to be masked?
Okay, a very good point, and I would like to answer this right now. So see here, when I talk about to storing the data, I mentioned one point that they wanted to store the full 16 digit, right? So when they say I want to keep the full 16 digits, because if any dispute any customer raises, then I require the full card number to verify. Right now, if customer is saying that I want only the last 4 digit to be stored, right? Now this last 4 digit is not considered as a card number. You get my point? So last 4 digit is not considered as a card number. So for that, they don't have to put any encryption. They don't have to show any retention period or security deletion. Now, from PCI point of view, there is a standard format for masking is you can keep the first 6, which is your bin number, and the last 4 of the data. So that is acceptable format. If you are keeping the first 6 and last 4 of the data, then it is not considered as a card number. Clear? I'm talking right now for the data at rest, means storing point of view. So if you're keeping, let's say you are saying that, no, I'm not storing the full card number, but I'm storing the first 8 and last 4. That is still considered as a full data because you are violating the PCI DSS acceptable format, which is first 6 and last 4. Is it clear, Ali?
So it means when I see on the website, the first 6 numbers are showing, then star, then at the end, 4 numbers are showing.
Right.
Does it mean they saved the whole data or not?
Okay. Right. So here you are talking about a different scenario. Okay. Why I said different scenario? Because you are talking about you can see those data, right? It means the display purpose. Now at the back end, I can store the full card number, but as a customer, I will show you only the first 6 and last 4. Right? There is a possibility that see what happens. Have you heard about role-based access control? So normally, let's say if me and you both are in the same department, I can see one file, but you cannot see the same file, although we are into the same department, right? So the same way, what they do for this card number at the back end, when they store the full card number in encrypted format, but when they display, they just display the first 6 and last 4. So display is a different thing. But at the back end, if they are storing it, then it means that they have to have the encryption and the retention period and the deletion.
And only this only shows when some kind of QSA assess that.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
Gotcha.
Because as a customer, you cannot understand that at the back end what they have done it.
Okay. So in the back end, they can either save the whole number, so we need to mask it, encrypted, or they can save the first 6 and the last 4, but it's not going to be considered as a PAN number. I mean a PAN, so you don't need to do any encryption and stuff.
Right. So it is again totally based on the justification that, let's say if they don't want the card number, so they will keep first 6 and last 4, and for that at the display level also you see the first 6 and last 4, and at the backend data at rest level also you see the first 6 and last 4. And for that encryption is not required, but they want to store the data, then encryption is required, secure deletion is required, and the retention period is required. But as a customer you won't know, because at the end user you don't know that whether what they are doing at the backend. As an auditor only, when you ask them, then they will explain about it, and then they will explain their business terminology and requirement.
Yeah, clear. Thank you.
All right, Pratap ji, you have
Yes,
raised
sir.
your
I
hand.
have a query, sir. I'm just asking from a normal user perspective. If any entity is storing outside data, then how we come to know that they are storing or not? It is very much required. And as auditor, you have do we have asked 3.4, 3.3 something, and 3.2? It is standard reference
Yes,
or?
yes, yes. These are the standard, right? So as currently that standard 3.2.1 is going, so these are like 3.4, 3.5. So these are like in ISO we discuss about the clause and controls, right? So these are the requirements. I'll explain the requirements about it. But to answer your query, as a customer, as an end user, you cannot know, or you won't know that how they are storing it, what they are storing it, because they are not bound to answer you,
No,
right?
just I'm asking as a user, someone is data is storing or not. How we assure that? Should I
On
use that side or not? No,
honestly speaking, only in one case you can understand. See, bank always store your data, because they let's say if I take example of bank, right? So because they are producing your data, so let's say if you have a SBI card, so it means that all the details of yours is with SBI, and based on that only they will give your money, or you can complete your transactions, right? When it comes to the e-commerce, let's say Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra or any other websites to with you, with that, if you do any transaction, and if there is an option of save the card, it means that's saving it. But it doesn't mean that if they are not giving you the option of saving the card, it doesn't mean that they cannot store it. For their business purpose they can store it, but as an end user, probably we don't have any option to check whether they are storing our data.
So, as an auditor, how we come to know that this is compliance, PCI DSS compliance, following the compliance or not? Because there is no check, then how we do?
No, there is a check. There is a check. So in my slide, I told you about that we are going to discuss that assessment methodology, right? So as an auditor, when I go to any organization, so how I do it, I'll explain that part, right? And how we come to know whether they are storing the data, whether they are keeping the data, what is the requirement. We will discuss those points.
Ashish ji,
Yeah,
Aditya here.
Ji.
So these clauses which we are seeing, 3.2, 3.3. So is it something which is available in open source as a document?
Yes. PCI DSS standard is available actually.
Can you kindly share it with us after this? Maybe अगर आप link या कुछ share कर देंगे इसका.
For sure.
Thank you.
All right, Anup ji, do you have any question?
Yes, sir. I have a question. In retention period, is itself organization declared or by the mentioned standard? And I am talking about the retention period.
About what?
Retention period, sir.
Retention period. It is from the standard. It says that as per the business requirement, because every entity has their own requirement. All that is also plays a major role over here. That one is that business just requirement, and another is the regulatory requirement or local law requirement. Okay, so let's say there are two different business processes. As an entity, I can declare that for this particular process I need the data for 1 year, but it doesn't mean that it will be generic for the whole business. from the same entity. For another process, they will be probably having only data for 1 day. I'll take that example. So, in banks, so normally what happens in banks, so let's say you went to the bank and you asked that, I want to open an account with you guys, right? So what do you do? If it is a, any nationalized bank of India, so you go and fill one form. But nowadays everything is online. So, but even in online also you fill the form, right? So you don't have any card number till now. What you are filling it, you are filling your address, phone number, and then you give your Aadhaar, PAN, blah blah blah, a lot of things you give it. Based on that, they create a, they call it as an embossing file. Embossing means the data which is embossed on the card, right? And that embossing file actually has your card number, your CVV, your track data, your all the details, because they have to put on the card. You see that the example that a backside, the black magnetic strip. So all the data is actually embossed over there. Your card number will be printed, your CVV will be printed. So basically the banks has those data, right? But being a bank, even they are not allowed to store your sensitive authentication data. So once the job is done, means your card is printed, then they must delete those data from their environment. Now you might be thinking that if they are deleting my CVV, they are deleting my PIN, then how they are authorizing my transaction? So when you enter your card into ATM or POS machine, how they are dealing with it? So they actually generate some mapping data and they are stored, which is allowed from the PCI. And they have a one solution called HSM, hardware security modules, right? That HSM over the fly verifies this CVV and PIN data. So that is where they are maintaining the security, that we are not storing the the SAT data. We are just processing it till the authorization. After that, again, it will be deleted, right? So coming to your question that retention period is mentioned in the standard, no. The retention period is totally based on the organization to organization, based on their requirement. Even one organization for 5 different processes, they can have a 5 different retention period. Clear, Anujji?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, Kiranji.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know, is PCIDSS, does it follow any kind of framework like ISO? I mean, any central framework?
PCI DSS, ma'am, is a standard itself.
Okay. So any country will follow PCIDSS. That's it. I mean, unlike India or Bangladesh.
It's a global standard, ma'am. Global standard,
Okay.
and all the countries. See, again here it is not enforced by any payment brands, right? So let's say if RBI, if I take example of India, right? So if RBI is pushing to all the banks that, hey, you are dealing with a card number, you have to go for PCI, it means that all the banks must go for the PCI. If they are telling to all the merchant that if you are dealing with the card numbers or payment gateways, you are dealing with the card numbers, you have to go with the PCI DSS. Like in Bangladesh, their central bank has given a deadline, somewhere till 2020 December, that all the banks has to PCI certified. But due to Corona and all, they have extended. So it is again from the central body. If they are enforcing, definitely you have to go, because this is a global standard, right? And across the world, the same standard is being followed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Yeah. Sai Sri Ji, you have some question?
Yeah, good morning, Ashish. I mean, it is really interesting. You are taking the thing in a very beautiful way. Thanks, with a lot of real time examples. So I just had, I had two questions in fact, but actually you answered one with the new card scenario. The other thing was, nowadays we hear this dark web which has access to a lot of PIIs. From the banking, credit card, and all. So, in spite of all these PCI standards, where you say the encryption happens on fly, checking happens, how is this possible that these people have access to it? I mean, if you can throw some light, it would be really great.
See, it's very interesting question, Saiji. Thank you very much for putting here. See, first of all, first of all, if someone says that we are 100% secure, so it's a totally myth, right? You know that Aditya ji will be with me over here. If someone is saying that we are 100% secure because he's from the different background where this particular portion is very important, that declaring I'm secure, nobody is secure, right? Now here these the standards or these the frameworks, right? It's a kind of a assurance which say that okay, you are or you should follow these are the guidelines, so at least the risk of being breached or being compromised will be on the lesser side, right? From the security enthusiastic also, you see that see the bad guys are more smarter, right? Because when you come to the destructive mind, right, if you have to destroy anything, then you have a lot of things to think about it and to do about it, right? But when you are on the other hand, on the securing things, right, you are bound that okay, I have this much detail, I have to use only this material and that material and all. Now coming back to your question that the data which is being exposed to the dark web, right? If you have seen the history and when you see the root cause analysis of those, so there is one thing, regardless any standard or framework, there is one thing which is very important and where we lack as a security person is what? Tell me.
It's a trust.
No, it's the awareness.
Awareness. Okay. Yeah, that's true.
Right? First of all, trust, don't trust. Right?
Okay.
There is no trust at all. It's all about awareness, right? I'll take one example because see, I have done like almost 100 audits, almost in 20 countries, right? So when I started this journey, so few of the client, because I was new, so I was always, I did not have a lot of examples to explain to our clients, so I always go by book, right? So one client, he asked, okay Ashish, you get my card number, what you can do with that, right? I mean, we also can think in that way that okay, I give my card number to Aditya ji or Aditya ji's card number is to someone else. What they can do, because nowadays if you do any transaction, you get a OTP, right? Without OTP, the transaction will not successful unless until you have a that tap card, which is the limitations of 2000, right? So the question was very very interesting, and I was blank at that time that how to answer this, right? And then all of a sudden it came in my mind that okay, if I got your card and I did not use it, but I told to 10 people that I have his card number, so he was into the blank state that okay, yes, that is something. And there only we actually came about it, or actually I thought about it, that in this industry reputation is very much important.
Yes, that's true.
Right? So let's say if I am saying that there is a bank A has not lost actually, when they say that 20,000 card numbers are there on the dark web, it doesn't mean that all the 20,000 were actually used or something had happened with that. But what happened, that particular bank has lost trust. Now here your word trust comes into picture, but who lost the trust? Customer lost the trust into the bank. But for the bank as a business, what they lost the reputation in the market. Now let's say that bank has 100,000 customers, but on the dark web they said that only 20,000 is exposed. Now all the 100,000 will think that whose 20,000, whose card into that 20,000 list.
Exactly.
Right. So this is how this impact. So as a card, if the card number is getting exposed to anyone, right? Probably you will not be, you will not be able to use that card for some XYZ transactions. But that person will have, that if I say that, okay, I spread your card numbers with 10 people. Now what he will do, he will first go and block the card, right? Although he knows that, he cannot do anything with my card, but he does that. So here in terms of ISO, in terms of PCI or Swift, anything, awareness is very important. So if you're not aware, like I don't know, like a lot of people have encountered Jagbirji or Adityaji and all, right? All the people who are here in earlier days when you used to have a credit card, right? So how you make a payment, you go to the bank, right? There is a one receipt. You put your card numbers over there. You put your amount and then you give it to the teller, right? Now teller, what they do, they enter the card number into their system, they find it. Have you ever think that what they do with that receipt which has the card numbers? Sometimes you see those card numbers are there on their table itself. Or sometimes as a customer, I wrote a card number and then other details, I wrote it wrongly. So what I used to do, I just, tear that paper, or I'll just wrap it and I'll throw into the dustbin. Clear? So these were the awareness which this standards or framework do with the entities, right? With even they explain to the customer. Nowadays you see a lot of banks or a lot of advertisement, you will be seeing that this bank is not never ask about the card numbers or pin data and all. What they are doing, actually they are just spreading the awareness.
Correct.
Right.
Great.
All right, so let's move to the next. I talk a lot. All right, on a lighter note, let's discuss something. Okay, so you all are ready, right, with this? Oh, it's very small questions, right? Just for the. So what is the best way to reduce the scope?
Do not store.
Store encrypted data.
Do not store data.
Encrypted data.
Encryption, I mean, strong encryption, I think.
The third one, do not store the data. I think so.
Guys, please use the chat box. I just wanted to see the answers in chat box. I heard people encrypted and do not store, but
quick question.
Or mass format or any other format, it means that we are having some of the data of the card numbers, right? Either full or mass. It means that PCI applies on
Yes. Yes.
Right? But if I'm not storing at all,
yeah,
does it mean that PCI doesn't apply?
Yeah.
No.
It still applies because the framework, I think it should.
Yes, it's apply.
Right.
Yeah.
So see, this was actually a trick. So here I use the word reduce the scope. I did not mention that, to not apply PCI on me. So if you remember the standard, the thumb rule, split, store, process, or transmit. So it means that entity is still transmitting something, and then they are, coming into the storing, whether it is a mask or encrypted and all. If they do not store, so the scope will be reduced. So let's say on the database, I don't have to think about the retention. I don't have to think about the deletion or something, right?
Yes.
So my scope of work has been reduced, right?
Sir, as per the PCI DSS point of view, you're correctly, sir. You correctly said. But at the in the practical stuff, like I suppose I would like to do some cyber forensics investigations on the data. So if I'm not going to get any specific data, so how would I going to do some reverse engineering, and how would I find out who is the the hacks happen from where, and how would I find investigation things?
Maheshji, you went so deep into it. See, the question was, very, precise with reducing the scope, right? It doesn't mean that, you are not allowed to store the data or something. It was on the best practices to reduce the scope. Now, I'll take an example to explain it, right? So let's say if it is a bank, right? Now you went to the bank for the audit. Although why I'm asking this question, because the next slides is something which is going to be a very interesting, where actually how do we define the scope, right, of any entity. So there were questions from multiple people, that whether the payment gateways falls under it, how the merchants will fall under it, and others, right? So that we are going to discuss in how do we do the scope, right? But here the question was very precise to be that how do we reduce the scope? So let's say you have 3 databases, you wanted to do forensic and all other things. You keep the data in one database, but the other 2 databases you do not store it. So my scope will be, limited to one database only, right? The other 2 database I can do some, standardization, and I can make them out of the scope from PCI. So from that point of view.
Okay.
Aditya ji.
And sir, my question
I
was
think
here that
still not convinced.
No. So,
sir,
yeah, please, continue, Mr. Mahesh.
Sir, I have one question. Right now, sir, there's so many companies providing MasterCard on different Visa card as a virtual data card. You can say that, okay? So suppose I would like to do a transaction. Suppose a US company, and I'm going to getting some rewards point, or if I'm going to take some virtualized Visa card from India. So the international transactions will be happen same time. So it is the PCI DSS applicable to the Indian companies, or it is going to applicable on the US based company where they're going to deliver the Visa card from US to India.
See, PCI DSS apply. So over here, both entity can be fall under it, right? So first, for sure, the entity who's providing the card, like they become a issuer, right? I just spoke about the issuer and acquirer. So they become a issuer. It means that all the data, like whatever there is on your virtual card, still, although it says a virtual, but at the end you have to print those, right? Print, I mean, it doesn't mean that, the hard copy. It means that you have to emboss those things, that this CVV belongs to you, this card number belongs to you and all, right? So they become issuer. So by default, that entity will fall under PCI scope. Now the entity to whom they deliver the card, if they are using reward points just based on your transaction, there is no card number involved over here, right? Let's say you are doing a transaction with those card into some XYZ merchants or payment gateway, but all the reward points are being accumulated and being stored at the Indian entity. They are not at all with storing, processing of cardholder data. They will be excluded from it. But if they need that particular card number to use and get the reward points, then definitely they will also fall under it, because they are processing or transmitting of the card data.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Aditya ji, sorry.
So see, my point was that in today's day and age, now this data is being used for a lot of analytics. I mean, there are a lot of, I'd say, a company like Amazon or any other company, customer behavior, card kitni baar swipe ho raha hai, kis cheez ke liye swipe ho raha hai. They try to build a customer 360 around it. They try to push things, and so finally there is as you rightly said, agar data store ही नहीं करेंगे, the matter gets totally resolved. But that may not be something which will really be feasible. So in that scenario, I think maybe that is the reason why this compliance has actually come in. And we want this data to be totally secure, because if you look at the overall larger ecosystem, and with things like UPI coming in, which I do understand, there is actually a war on between the entire mechanism of credit cards and UPI. So we may still see a further change coming up in the near future. And one question which I had was, something like when the standard is made, Europe came up with something like GDPR, right? US has their own standard. हम अपना यहाँ पे अभी data protection bill निकाल रहे हैं. So is there something which we can say which is overarching? Yeah, how do we try to establish a connection between the two? Because agar card data leak hua, how do we connect it up with something like a violation of GDPR? I know this is slightly outside the purview of this class, but maybe you could take it on at some point.
So let me take your questions one by one, right? What if I understood correctly? So first thing, let me actually explain you the question, which is there. So the question was reducing the scope, right? So let's say, as also Mahesh also took the same point, right? So let's say I have a 10 databases, and I'm keeping the databases. I'm keeping the data into all the 10 databases. It means my scope of work is actually on those 10 databases. Clear this part? Now what I did for my business analytics or all the business cases, what I did on 8 databases, either I keep it the mass data, But again, the question is that mass data is somewhere it is going. Or if I say encrypted data, it means that data is still there. It means my scope of work are again on those 10 systems, right? Now, what I did, I removed the totally data from 5 databases and I kept the data into these 5 databases where I'm doing all the business analytics or I'm doing all the permutation combination to understand the overall scenario. Now, with the network segmentation or some other methodology, I will reduce my scope to only these 5 databases. So as an entity, what I have to think, I have to buy a license only for 5 databases to encrypt my data. Now here I'm doing the cost cutting, right? Now I'm also, reducing my effort. Now you see that I have to think about, 10 databases for the database the retention of the data and the secure deletion of the data and the licenses. Now I cut down from 10 to 5. So I have reduced my scope, right? So I have reduced what? I have reduced monitoring. I have reduced my, the team task, right? So they won't bother about to maintaining the retention period or the secure deletion on other 5 systems, right? So the question was reducing the scope.
Understood. Understood.
Now coming to your point, which is very interesting, that how these things gets apply or whether it will be overlap. Yes, there are overlaps. Let's say I did a Swift assessment for multiple banks. So basically Swift, as when we do the international transactions and all, right? So where Swift comes into a picture, Swift is almost a replica of ISO and PCI. So being a Swift assessor, what they say that if you are a PCI QSA assessor, you can do the Swift audit. Because in Swift, there is a section, Kiran ma'am was asking, right, whether in PCI we have a mapping or not. No, PCI is totally a technical standard. We do not have a mapping with ISO, but if I go to the Swift, in Swift, there is a section in their framework itself that, Swift clause 1 meets to the ISO, meets to the PCI. So yes, there is a 100%. I'm not saying 100%. Sorry, that is a wrong word. But yes, there is a chance of overlapping of the standards and framework which is there worldwide. So GDPR is not the technical standard. First of all, it is not the standard of framework. Basically, GDPR is a regulation, okay, which is bound for all the European entities. So even let's say if SBI being an Indian bank, if I'm storing the data or if I'm dealing with any of the PII data with European citizens, I'm bound to, go ahead with those GDPR regulations. Because if, in India, it's very common, or basically in this subcontinent, you always get a call, sir, we are giving you loan, sir, we are giving you credit card, sir, we are giving you this, that, in a daily, you are getting a lot of calls, right? And when you ask them that from where did you get my card number, my number, they won't answer you. Probably they cut the call or they say that from the marketing division. But if it is a Europe, right, in GDPR regulation, because I do the GDPR assessment as well. So in GDPR regulation, what they say, they have a right, customer has a right, to erase the data. So let's say if it is a bank and I'm saying that you cannot use my data, my personal data means my phone number, forget about the card number. You cannot disclose even my gender unless until I authorize you. You cannot disclose my phone number, my address unless until I tell you that yes, right to use my data. I have a rights to erase my data over there. And that is why that particular regulation has in terms of the fines, it is like you won't imagine that the fine level, how much they have if something is wrong, right? So if someone calls them, from any entity, they can sue that particular client or that particular entity, that how did you use my my numbers or my personal numbers to call me or to distribute any of the marketing department, because I have not given you authorization. You don't have any rights to use my data. So yes, we are, being a the data the recently the India has, they were talking about the data privacy and all, right? So we are still not that much mature, but yes, the point to shorten the answer, yes, there are overlapping with the standards and framework, especially these type of standards, which is the technical. So see, the mother of every standard or framework is ISO, right? So from ISO, everything started, that maintaining the CIA, but they are moving into a different side. So let's say PCI becomes more into the technical, right? I'll explain this when I explain the requirements. Then you will amaze to see that although it is only, we call it as a card data industry, but you see that from lot of aspects, basically they think to secure the data, right? All right, so
Question.
yes,
Ashish,
sorry.
I have a question. Now,
Yes.
we are doing this
I think
split,
it was
right?
it was my time to ask the question.
Yeah.
Yes, Vishal. Yeah, please go ahead. No,
Yeah.
please. Jokes apart.
Yeah. So we are talking about the split, and for anybody who's doing this split, it has to be like PCI DSS, right? So let's say I'm having a hypothetical question. I'm having online shop, I'm having mom and pop shop, and I'm dealing with lots of payment. Does it mean if I do this split, I will not get my payment processed? I have to do PCI DSS to get my to be able to collect payment or not? And what if I don't? What will happen?
So see, here what I said in the beginning of it, right? So it is good to have, right? But unless until the regulatory body is enforcing you, or the acquirer is enforcing you, you are still free to use the card numbers or something. Because in whole world there are a lot of merchants or something, they are still using the POS machine. You go there, you tap your card, you insert your card and do all. Doesn't mean that all the merchants are PCI certified, right? But let's say if you are using if I may ask, which country you're from, India or somewhere else?
No, I live in the US and I work for UAE.
Okay, fine. So let's take an example of HSBC, right? So it's known to across the world. So let's say you open the shop and you are using a point of sale where you actually swap the cards, right? You are using the point of sale of POS machine from the HSBC, right? It means that you have some kind of agreement with HSBC that I'm going to use your POS machine, and all the data will go through your payment gateway or some other channel which belongs to you, right? Now HSBC has a full rights. Then they will say that, hey, Ali, if you wanted to do a business with us, you have to be PCI certified because you are dealing with the card numbers. Now here you have to go ahead with the PCI DSS certification. But if they are not asking you, because see what happens is that in this particular industry of the card business, right, they also see the amount of transactions. So let's say if your transaction value is very less, right? So they won't bother you that you go ahead for PCI DSS, because PCI DSS is a costly certification, right? And if your transaction is, let's say, 100,000 per month or per quarter, so they won't bother you. But let's say if you are a payment gateway and 2,000 or 5,000 merchants are connected with you, and you are having 100,000 US per day transaction, right? So they will see that you have a more risk compared to the smaller merchants. Then HSBC will say that, hey, Ali, you have to go for the PCI DSS certification, because we have a 5,000 merchants which is connected to you, and there are a lot of chances or there are a lot of risk, because you are processing those card numbers, you are transmitting those card numbers, or at some point of time you are storing those card numbers, right? So it is totally based on the regulatory body and the acquirer. If they are asking you to go for PCI DSS certification, you are bound to go, else it is up to you, up to the entity.
So that most of the time, then the customer of, let's say, a QSA assessor, it's only the big organizations who deals with lots of transactions, like a payment gateway, like a payment gateway of, let's say, PayPal. PayPal can be considered as a payment gateway, right?
Right. So even if you see, you worked in UAE, right? You said.
Yeah.
Right. So we did an assessment for UAE banks as well. So I'll take an example. So I won't name any customer over here, but I'll just explain you. So even the UAE, the Central Bank of UAE, right? They have mandated to all the banks to go ahead for PCI DSS certification. Now you see that they are into a business from a very long time, right? But they were not certified because there were no enforcement from the regulatory body. Now central bank is, and why all these came into a picture? Because Visa is asking question, and now Visa is on the upper hand. They can ask question to anyone, to any banks or any central entity. Now, if they ask a question to the central bank is will go to the the payment gateways. They will go to the banks that, hey guys, see, we are getting a question. Now you have to PCI certified. Or sometimes bank Visa directly involved with the bank that, hey guys, see, you are doing a lot of transaction with us, right? Please do the PCI DSS certification. That's it. And you are bound to do that.
Can they like threaten them and tell them, hey, we'll kick you if you don't do that?
Yes. I mean, threaten is not like
the SWIFT network.
Yeah, so they threat their threat is in a different thing that we can probably stop the business with you, right? So they sometimes they ask, that, okay, what is the timeline? So to avoid any, even see, stopping the business is a different thing, right? Because even Visa doesn't want to lose any customer, because they have to also get their bread and butter, right? So what they do, they will say that, okay, if you're not getting certified by Q4 2023, then we will penalize you with 10,000 USD or 100,000 USD. So now bank will go for it. Clear?
Clear, thank you.
Great. Right. And before we go for the scoping part, right, and the terminology, because here we are going to use some of the terminology, right? Is there any question, or it's almost like 2 hours? Do you guys need a break?
Hello, sir. I have a question. As a customer, how can I understood whether bank is PCI DSS certified or not?
So there is a again here, as a customer, if bank, whether how do you know that whether they are certified or not? There is a one website from where you can check, but again that is not mandatory that all the certified entity are registered with that. So there is a website from Visa Registry for Service Providers. So I'll show you that later on. Just make a note of it. So if you just put a name over there, that particular entity will show that yes, whether they are certified or not, and for what business. But again, as I said, if those are not registered with Visa, so sometimes they are certified, but there is an option to get registered with Visa or Master. If they are not opting it, it is not necessary that you will come to know. For the payment gateway, sometimes if you see, for example, we are using a wallet, right? The Phone Pay. So when you open the PhonePe website or the application, on the bottom side nowadays they are started putting that PCI DSS certified. Right. So from there actually you come to know, but there is no 100% accurate answer for it, that whether you come to know from um, some other sources or something. You can ask them or you can tell them, but there is nothing concrete data you can get it apart from that Visa registry, but that is also not mandated. So Jagbir, what do you say, that we'll take a break or should I continue?
Yeah. No, Ashish, it's all yours. So, but yeah, we can take a break, a short break. So
Okay.
10 to 15 minutes we can take a break, and then we'll continue with the same link. And so after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, as per your convenience.
I'm okay. See, right now it's a IST time 12, right? So if everyone is okay, we'll start in next 10 minutes, depending on their time zone, right? So let's not confuse with the timing. After 10 minutes, we'll start.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Perfect. So I hope everyone is back. We'll wait for another Another minute and then we'll start.
Ashish, thank you. And please don't mind if the participants are asking a lot of queries. So, because
I'm happy for that.
this subject is very interesting. So you might be getting extra questions on this.
Jagbir, if I'm getting question, it means that, either I'm not very much clear or something is very interesting. So I will take the option 2.
No, the things are very, very much clear. And in fact, it is very interesting.
All right, so let's start. Okay,
Yeah.
so here the question to many entities, right? Basically, when we go, so normally they say that, okay, we want to get certified. And this question to all of you also, right? And a lot of other people, how to define the scope. So let's say if it is a bank, so bank has, n number of users and number of customers and number of systems. On the other side, if it is a payment gateway, so probably the scope is by nature itself it is a very less, right? But even if it is a less, so let's say there are 100 systems in that payment gateway as an organization, so whether all those 100 comes into a picture or how to define it, right? So we'll discuss that, and this is going to be a more interesting, whatever we have discussed till now, this is something is going to be more interesting when it comes to the scoping, right? So we all know that the thumb rule of PCI is a store, process and transmit, which we in a shorter form we can call it as a split, right? And there are certain terminology which is again like entity to entity, but from the PCI point of view I will use it. So the one terminology they call it as a card holder data environment, right? So as we discussed earlier on the I think second or third slide, whereas like what is PCI DSS, so we said that infrastructure, right? Certifying the infrastructure. So here we'll see that what is card holder data environment. Now, what exactly the card holder data environment? We are talking about PCI DSS. Now, suddenly you are come up with what is card holder data environment. So card holder data environment is the system which store, just 1 second, please. Sorry for that. Today is Saturday, so family is waiting for a lot of things. All right. So yeah. So coming back to the slide, right? So the first thing is the card holder data environment. So what is card holder data environment? So the infrastructure or the system or the application or the database which store, process and transmit the card holder data that is part of the CD. Clear? System, application, databases or server which store, process or transmit card holder data is called CD environment. Can someone give me example? So let's make it interactive rather than that, one directional. So can someone give me example from your, experience, from your knowledge, that what things comes in your mind when we talk about the store, process and transfer?
Yeah, Ashish, in my mind, see, data have a 3 state: data, the store, data, transmit, or the other, transmit or we can the transition form, right?
Right.
So this is my understanding.
So which system comes into, any example?
Ashish, store means SAN, process means application, transmit means network. Simple.
Perfect. Right. So here, if I take an example,
Can you please repeat this?
Ilyasji, please.
Store is nothing but SAN, where it's a network storage where you store the data. Process is application, which is used to process the data. The transmit is network.
Right. So in a a normal situation, so where do we store the data normally? Either on the databases. So examples could be, it could be on application server, in some file you store the data, or on the databases, or on the file server, or on the workstation. So let's say if you downloaded a report, right, and that report is in the Excel format, which has the full card number, right? And you are storing on your workstation. That could be one example. You are sharing any data through SFTP, some data which I'm talking about that contains the card number. So one of the example, databases is the main where you are storing it, right? Processing, it can be done through the application. Transmission can be done through the application as well. Okay. Here, I would differ with one point which Ilyasji has mentioned about it. The transmission, yes, in the basic terms, when we talk about the transmission, definitely the network devices comes into a picture. But when it comes to the data, right, network doesn't know data. It just know the packets, right? The header, footers, the source, destination, those things, right? So here the systems which store, process, and transmit the card data. Here we have to be very precise with it. The card holder data, those are called card holder data environment. So first we have to identify what? We have to identify these details, right? Now, how will you identify? Although this was a part of the another slide, that assessment methodology, but this here, if I explain, it will be more relevant. Some gentlemen asked this question, right? Then how do we know about it? So when we go, let's take an example, right? So let's say you have been hired from Amazon, right? And Amazon said that, we want to get certified by PCI DSS. So normally when being an auditor or being a consultant, when you go to any entity, what do you ask the first thing? The first thing is always, what is your business? Right? Even in ISO, if you go and you ask them about the scope, so, they will give you the overall a glimpse of what they do as an organization, what is their business, right? So now Amazon will say that, okay, we have a 10 businesses as an entity, we have a 10 business, right? My next question would be what? That which business is actually dealing with a card, or why you want to go for PCI DSS. So they will say that, okay, see, Ashish, we have, or see, the QSA, we have these two processes wherein customer, if they buy something, so they enter their card number, and for our business need, we are storing it. So what we got, when they say that they enter the card number, so what our next question, where they enter, right? They will say this is our application. Fine. So you got one, right? One application you got it, where they are saying that we are entering the card numbers. It means there is a processing or transmitting possibilities there, right? Now they will say that from that particular application, it goes to the payment gateway. It means they are transmitting the data. And then they will say that, okay, for our dispute purpose, we are storing the full card number in encrypted format. So it means that the next question would be, where are you storing it? They will say that, okay, I have one database which is linked to this application. Now you came to know two things, right? So I'm taking Amazon over here as a business case. If you have any question in between, please stop me. Okay, we'll discuss. So here we came to know two. One is the one application. Let's say the application name is Amazon itself, right? And then the database name is Amazon database. So we came to know two. One application in scope because it is transmitting the data, and the database is in scope which is storing the data, right? So on a high level, we came to know about this particular two things. This is what? This is our card data environment. Clear this stream? Now, if any entity has a
Ashish.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So if process is the application that is transmitting the data, then what does the transmit do? Is
transmitting?
It not like network? Yeah. You said storing. Yeah. I mean, one is database and one is application, right?
Right.
So application is the process part. If I'm right. Yeah. So what is the transmit part? I want to understand. If it's
so transmission is also through the application. See, ma'am, what happens is, let's say you enter the card numbers into the application web page, right?
Okay.
Now you enter the card number, you enter the cardholder name, expiry, and CVV. Now this Amazon, when this sends the data to the payment gateway, they will send, first of all, from the application itself. It will go through the network devices and all. That is a different thing. I will talk about it. But this application does the transmission part as well. You if you see that, the application has it is running over HTTPS and TLS and all, right?
Yeah.
So they do the transmission part. Now processing is what? So they get a lot of data, right? as an input, they get a lot of data, but what they are storing, they're storing the cardholder name and the card numbers. The CVV and all, they are just doing the pass through. They're not storing it because it is not allowed. We discussed about it, right?
Yeah.
So this is called processing. So application does the both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Now, if you see in the industry, so we have a.
Sorry, Ashish sir. I just with respect to the transmit, and I would like to ask one more question.
Yes.
With respect to this, can I ask?
Yes. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure whether this has been already answered or going to be answered in a subsequent. In the layman term, assume that.
Sorry, I'm losing you in between. I'm not able to hear you properly.
Okay, now, sir.
Yeah, it is clear.
Okay, yeah. So in the layman terminology, for example, I'll go to a petrol bunk, I'll swipe my card. So we have 7 OSI layers, right? For example, like it will go to various levels. So when I swipe the card, and with respect to 7 OSI layer models, each level how it get interact. For example, swiping and application, then it go to like Visa or Master or whatever the networks. It will come back. Like issuer bank and acquirer bank, various levels it does, right? At each level, which OSI layer model will get interact. I think that will be if I get to know on that way, it will be much more understandable for me at least.
Okay, that is definitely I can explain, right? But that needs a specific explanation, and it will a little bit time consuming, right? So I will hold this question for now. If I get a chance, tomorrow we are discussing some of the methodology in terms of the banking and all, right? So there I will try to explain. But again, on the OSI layer, which you said that what happens when it comes to the it go from PDNT to PA, right? So basically the one which you talk about on the example, like you took about a petrol pump, right? So what happens when you do on the POS machine, right? So what happens? POS itself has an application inbuilt, right?
Correct.
So when you do this swapping, so there are two type of connectivity, or there are two different things which is being. I'm just taking it, on a high level, right? So one is the application, and another is a POS. POS itself, if it is using a GPRS, let's say there is a SIM inside. So in earlier days, the POS were connected with a PSTN line, right?
Correct.
Nowadays, you have a POS which has a we call it as a SIM POS, but in that technical terminology, they call it as a GPRS POS.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens is the data is transmitting in two ways. One, through the application itself, right? Because there are certain things when you swap your card, you also enter your PIN, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain things which application takes care. There are certain things which transmission layer takes care. That is on the network, right? But when it comes to the network doesn't understand. If you see the OSI layer, right, it is just taking into bits, frames, and packets, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't read the data inside it, whether it has a card number or your name or expiry or something.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So I explained you on a very high level to just so we will not totally untouch that particular part. So here there are two types of there are two major things involved. One is the application, which application does which is inside the POS machine, and then there is a through the network, like from the GPRS, it goes through. If you are using an Airtel SIM, it will go to the ISP, right? And then from ISP to the issuer card. Let's say if you are using a SBI card, right? So it will go to the SBI or HSBC, and then HSBC verifies, and again through the network channel, it comes to the POS machine, and you get all the things, right?
Yeah.
So what I was trying to explain over there on the transmission side, that here the transmission, there are two things. One, transmission on the network level, it just understand the packets which are being through from that particular layer, right? But on the application, it reads the data, what data is flowing. So here you will read the card number and you read the PIN as well.
Yeah.
Clear?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, the question was very interesting, so I just thought to answer it right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second point, the second section which we are going to discuss is very important. So here we all only discuss about store, process, transmit. Now, do you think that that will be our only scope? And the next hop which we are going to discuss is going to be, blow your mind. This is called non-cardholder data environment. Now, I told you what to remember the thumb rule, which is store, process, transmit. Now, what is non-cardholder data environment and what going to be? This is something very interesting. So systems or the network which is connected to CD, this, right? The system or network or infrastructure which is going to impact the security of CD. And this provide security segmentation and filtering. Sorry, I missed G over here. Security segmentation and filtering. Here comes your router, switch, and firewall. Because you are doing the segmentation on either on core switch or on the firewall, right? You does the security part of it. You are doing the filtering through the firewall. So this falls under non-CDE, right? Examples are, now this is going to be, Kiranji, I'll answer your query, but let me just explain, complete this. Antivirus, Active Directory, NTP, and SIM. Now you will be asking, or you will be, thinking, why antivirus? Because antivirus doesn't deal with store, process, and transmit of the cardholder data. Does it deal? It don't deal, right? Antivirus system itself, it is not required at all to deal with any card number. Do you think that NTP deals with the store, process, and transmit of the cardholder data? No, right?
Real time.
No.
Synchronized. No. Real time synchronized.
Sir, it's all about the technologies are going to be monitoring and alerting and events tracking only, not related to any sort of things, I can say.
Exactly. But what it is doing, it is connected to these data, because here application server, definitely you will be implementing antivirus on it if it is a Windows or Linux. If you are having 100 Windows system, then you might be having Active Directory. This is not mandatory, but normally entity has it. NTP you will have it, SIM devices you will have it, and there are other systems which will be either connected to this or impacting the security of this or providing this, right? Now this is called non-cardholder data environment. Now you will be also thinking that why I use this box. So the answer is, this box is part of your PCI scope. So in PCI scope, not only this, the system which store, process, and transmit, there are other systems which might impact the security of this, which is directly connected to this, which is providing the segmentation things to this. That will be also considered in PCI scope. So here the first, the question which I took on my previous slides, right? What is the best way to reduce the scope, right? So here those things comes into a picture. Now, if you let's assume, although it doesn't happen, but assume that one user actually downloads the Excel sheet which I took example, which has the card number on Active Directory. What will happen? What will happen to this Active Directory?
Can you repeat your question, please?
So if one user is downloading the card number on this Active Directory server, so what complications or what consequences he will face?
It can become part of CD.
Yes, very good. So this Active Directory becomes your CD network. Means now here your scope has been expanded. Now this Active Directory, the other systems which is connected to this Active Directory, because here it says the connected to CD, that will also fall under PCI scope, right?
Sir, Active Directory is basically used for centralized management. And suppose if I'm going to download any card holder's details or any information about the any card sort of things, so it will automatically triggered on alerts, events triggered, and it is comes under the compliance?
That happens only in that case, Maheshji, like if you have a DLP in place wherein you have a setup policy that if any systems which is, transmitting or storing the card data, then our policy trigger an alert. Now assume that not every entity has a DLP, right? Because this is not a mandated compliance solution. So if entity is a very small entity and unfortunately the the users is downloading it, here actually we discuss about this awareness, right? So here people is not aware that what will be the consequences if they are dealing with a card number, though as per their role it is not required, right? So the scope gets expanded, right? And they will not be in that state where they can even answer your queries that why do you need the card number, because the server administrator, the Active Directory administrator, why do they need the card number? So because there is a awareness lacking, that they are not aware about it, that if they store the card number, first of all it is not as per their business need, but their scope is expanded. Yes, so I see a lot of hands raised, right? So let's take a question. Kiranji, yes, start with you.
Yeah, Ashish, as you said, impact security, right? So how do we assess the security? I mean, whether it's critical or low or medium? How
Right. Very, very interesting question. Again, I'll go back to the Jagbirji's session, CIA, right? So here first of all, we see, as I said, the CIA is a backbone of everything, right? So what we are going to evaluate, if we are evaluating the risk, on which basis? We'll see that, okay, what if there is a data and the confidentiality breach of that data, or the integrity breach of data, or the availability breach of that particular data, right? So let's say if let's take an example, okay? So there is an application server which has the card number. There is a one antivirus server which doesn't have the card number. Now what is happening is, you are administrator of the antivirus. Now antivirus provides the security to this application server, right? It means that there will be communication in between these two devices, right? It means that this is the authorized which communicates to this. Now through this, if I'm trying to send any unauthorized application or any unauthorized request which might impact this applications, right? So it means this antivirus server becomes critical to me, right? Because through this antivirus I can breach this application server which is on the card data environment, right? So that is how we evaluate the risk, that okay, what if this happens, then what will be the consequences on CIA? Clear?
Confidentiality will be, okay.
Right, so this is how actually we get it. Shivam ji, yes.
I just want to confirm this thing. All the technical stacks, like security stacks, should come under non-CDE, right?
Not all. So see, let's say as an entity, I have a 5 firewalls, right? So there is a one firewall which connects to the other external party. There is one firewall which connects to the another external party. In all 5, I have only one firewall through which this web server, where the card number, the Amazon, which we took example, right? So Amazon web server and Amazon application server and database server, that is only behind with this particular firewall, right? So ideally,
like perimeter firewall.
Right. Yes. So ideally, I will take this. Now, in the next slide, there is another interesting part, right? That we are talking all the ideal scenarios, right? But there are other things which also impact all these thought process. If I take your question, right, and if I try to answer that, so not all the security systems will fall under scope. There are ways through which you can scope out those. Now, there only this QSAs and all, or the consultants play a major role, that, if as an entity has 100 systems, right, but they wanted to minimize the scope. So here the consultant and QSA says that, okay, if you do this particular systems will be scope out of the assessment. So your overall scope will reduce from 100 to 40 or 100 to 50. So your effort and monetary everything gets reduced, right?
So a scenario I have in mind. I have taken a payment gateway, and that payment gateway is applicable for one of application website, and incorporated that data transaction between banks and in our organization it is happen. So there is an audit for PCI something for customer in side or in application side. One thing. And another one question is, sir, is there any exam for PCI DSS have to clear eligibility to audit in banks and anywhere, or just what is the process? Just know.
Okay, I was expecting this question. So actually, to be a QSA, you have to be with the QSA organization. Right. So that is a mandatory thing that unless until you are part of any QSA organization, you cannot be act as an independent QSA per se. You can act as a consultant for if you have a knowledge of PCI DSS implementation and all. You can be independent consultant, but you cannot be an auditor. Right. That is one. The next question was the first question was because a lot of people has asked this question. So let me just take one example. Just 1 second. So I just draw one thing. Is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So how the traffic flows normally? So as a customer, let's say I went to the Amazon website, or what happened is that I bought some dresses. I did some shopping. So what I did, I entered what I entered my on Amazon website. Right. There are other ways. I'll take both example. Now this Amazon, it reads all my data and it directly sends to the, so let me put in this way. It sends to the bank. Okay. There is one way you enter your card number, your CVV, everything, and at the back end, Amazon sends the directly to the issuer. Now, who will be the issuer? So if you're using the HSBC card or SBI card and all, so basically the issuer will be, this will send to the bank directly if they have any direct agreement with them. The second scenario is here, enters all the data on the Amazon. Not what Amazon did. Amazon do not have a direct connection with the bank. They have a connection with a payment gateway. So they sends all the detail to the basically to the payment gateway. Now payment gateway sends all the detail to the bank, right? So there are two scenarios. Now what is happening? Amazon also taking your card number. Now Amazon is sending the card number to the payment gateway and your CVV, everything. Now payment gateway is sending this detail to the bank. As a customer, you don't know that who's payment gateway, because you are dealing only with whom? Your Amazon. If something goes wrong, then whom do you call? You call to Amazon, not the payment gateway, because you don't know who is the payment gateway or whether there is a payment gateway or not, right? Because this payment gateway do not have a direct agreement with the customer. It has an agreement with Amazon. Now the question was, PCI applies where, right? So ideally here, and here. Can anyone tell me why?
Could you repeat your question, Ashish?
So what I said, that PCI DSS applies, A means applies on Amazon. It applies
based on PST
and the bank also. Can you tell me the reason why it applies
based on PST? One is processing, one is
right. So here, let's say if Amazon, what it is doing, they are doing the, I don't know whether they are doing the storage and all, but at least I know that, they are doing the transmission. So as a assessor, as an auditor, when I go there, I ask them, okay, tell me your business. They will say that, when the customer enters the card number, so we are actually, with one of the payment gateway. Now I send all the details to this payment gateway. Now payment gateway sends this to the bank that I don't know. What I get, if the transaction is successful, this payment gateway respond me that yes, it is successful, and then I respond to the customer. So here I did the transmission of the card number. Now let's say if I'm the assessor and this payment gateway also hires me that, hey Ashish, we are actually dealing with a card number for one of our business and we want to get certified because we are transmitting, storing and processing of the card data. When I ask them, they won't talk about the customer. What they say that we receive the data from Amazon and then we send to the bank. So what data you receive, right? You receive the card data. So that is why it applies on Amazon also, it applies on payment gateway also, and bank is anyway, they are storing, they are issuing the card. So by default, they are applicable. Clear? So this is how the whole process works. And when you go for, let's say I'm an auditor for Amazon, I will discuss about this particular business where they are sending the data. I will also discuss that, okay, hey, Amazon, you said that, you are sending the detail to the payment gateway. What detail you are sending? They say that I share the CVV detail, I share the card numbers and all. Then there is a requirement in PCI that if you are sharing any cardholder data or sensitive authentication data to any of the service provider for any XYZ services, that service provider must also be PCI certified. There is a requirement which is very specific, talks about it.
Sir.
Yeah, sorry, someone was asking.
So here, sir, yeah. So here, for example, like issuer bank will get authorization based on your debit card, credit card, whatever. So here again, the network will come, right? Like whether it is a Visa, Master network, or Amex network people, right? So how they will be connecting with the issuer bank?
Correct. See, okay, let's take that example as well, right? So here what happens, I'll take an example of Indian banks. So let's say I put a Visa, MasterCard or Amex, and I will also take an example of NPCI. So what happens? The card is of one of the issuer bank. Okay, I'll take an example of HSBC. Now HSBC is a international bank. Now as a backend, what they do for their bin. So let's say if your card number starts with 44122, that is a bin of HSBC. If they are registered that bin with NPCI, so the traffic, again, it is based on the business to business. It is not mandatory that Visa Master comes into a picture, because these banks are basically the payment processor on behalf of Visa Master, right? So authorization done at this end, not the Visa and Master. Visa and Master is just a routing channel, right? So if I take example over here, so let's say you are using a HSBC card. So traffic will come here. It will go to the payment gateway. Now this bin is not, sorry, if bin is actually with NPCI, so here the traffic comes here to NPCI, and NPCI further sends the detail to the bank. This is only in that case wherein you are enrolled with NPCI. If you are not enrolled with PCI, it will go directly to, I mean, as per the, the flow, basically what they have defined. Now, let's say another flow. I'm not registered with NPCI. So here what will happen? If your card is a Visa, they will send you to Visa. Visa doesn't do any authorization. It will directly send the detail from here to bank, right? So this is the way the traffic flows, right? So it is totally depend how the bank has done their authorization process. If okay, I'll take example over here. I went to Sri Lanka. I used my SBI card into one of the ATMs over there, right? So what will happen in that case? I insert my card into, let's say, one of the bank called Union Bank, okay, in Sri Lanka. So I use my SBI card into Union Bank. Now, when I enter my card into Union Bank will see that, okay, they will send data to their central bank. Now, central bank says that, hey, this data or this bin number doesn't belong to any. So what they will do, they will see that, okay, this is a Visa card. Now there, they will send that card to the Visa. Now Visa will see, okay, this is an Indian bank bin. So from there, they will send this to whom? NPCI. NPCI checks, okay, this is the SBI. It will send to the SBI. Or if Visa will directly connect it to the SBI, they will directly send to the SBI. See, this whole process happened at the back end, but when you receive the money, it is just a friction of seconds, right? So this whole process happens at the back end when you are using this is called honest transaction and offers transaction in banking terminology. Honest means your card, your ATM means SBI card or HSBC card, HSBC ATM. Offers means HSBC card, Standard Chartered ATM. So there actually this Visa Master comes into picture. Yes.
Sir, I have one question in the same, like as per the PCI DSS compliance, it is once you are going to carry any card, so it is the as per the compliance, every company should go for the PCI DSS. But I have one thing that suppose the whole scenario is in the international clients, so international Visa card. So the transaction of money, some different currencies in overseas and in India, we have different currencies will be there. So what about what happened into the transaction phase into the international currencies will be there?
The currency really doesn't matter over here when it comes to the PCI. It only matters that whether you are dealing with a Visa, Master or Amex or something. Now this whole process of Forex exchange or the currency exchange or the pricing, right? It is all happening at the back end. So whenever you use the different channels, so let's say you went to Europe, right? You use your SBI card. So what happens is that, let's say you withdraw £100 or something, or euros, right? So what happens? They also take some additional charges, right? That is called, they call it as a transactional charges. But that all happens at the back end. And there is a one, they call it as a what? Escrow account or something. They call it one account, right? Where actually the entity do the settlement. Now that settlement happens between entity to entity. Now I'll take a one quick example. So let's say you use a HSBC card, right, on Standard Chartered ATM. So what happens? Who gave you the money? Ideally, it got deducted from your account, which is HSBC. But from where did you receive? From Standard Chartered, right? So let's say if you withdraw 1,000 rupees, so it got deducted from the ATM of Standard Chartered. Now at the back end, Standard Chartered and HSBC does the settlement that, hey, HSBC, today one of your customer came to my ATM and they took 1,000 rupees from our ATM. Now you have to pay those 1,000 rupees to me. So that all happens at the back end, right? And these are the processes which comes to the PCI DSS as well, right? Wherein, the card flows at. So this is how we define the scope, that which process are dealing with the card number. That is what I said, right? When you go to the branch, when you go to any entity, you understand their business, right? For which business they are dealing with a card number, and those businesses will comes under PCI scope, and then their underlying infrastructures also comes into the PCI DSS scope. I hope that is clear, Mahesh.
Ashish,
Yes.
Ashish, I have a query. Ashish, in terms of this example, Amazon payment gateway and bank. I know Amazon, as you have clearly said, that Amazon is a transmitter. Okay, bank can be storer, bank can be processor, bank can be transmitter also.
Right.
Okay, the role of a payment gateway is authorization, because it authorizes the card details. But they are also will be processing, or they will be only transmitting.
See, authorization always done at the issuer end, because payment gateway does not own your data. As a customer, do you think that the payment gateway should keep your data? Because the data produces from the bank, right? Now here the payment gateway role, let me explain over here that, nowadays the entity, they are become more smart. So what they do, they just wanted to reduce the headache from their head. So this Amazon, what they did, I'll take another example. Morning also, before our session, I just took a screenshot. Although I did not do any shopping, but I took a screenshot just to explain you. Let me just share that. Sorry. Okay. I hope this is visible to everyone. Right. So what I did, there is an option when you go to the Amazon, right? There is an option of proceed to buy, right? So when you go for a buy option, you see here, it says enter the card numbers. And what you see over here, web page of Amazon, correct? It means that you are entering the card numbers on web page of Amazon. Now, there are entities, what they do when you click on the proceed to buy, it redirects to some other payment gateway. Now, in that case, this web page doesn't belong to Amazon. That web page belongs to, let's say, BillDesk or Razorpay or some other, or PayPal per se, if I take an international example to explain other audience, right? So when you click on the Amazon proceed to buy, they actually redirects and give you the page of payment gateway, which is PayPal. Now those card data which you are entering where? You are entering on the web page of PayPal. Clear? See the risk over here. So what Amazon did, they transferred the risk that, hey, I don't want to take any card number or CVV on my web page. It will be only on the redirected to on the web page of PayPal. Now what PayPal is doing? PayPal, again, they don't do any kind of authorization. PayPal is just a middleman, right? It is just it's a just pass-through channel. So data comes, read, send. Sometimes they don't even read also, like CVV and all, they don't even read because they don't need that data. So here what payment gateway is doing, if I take the example back to my this, right? What it is doing, it is transmitting the data. Now, for some cases, they wanted to store, so they will process and they will store the data as well. Again, for the dispute cases and all. Now, why they do the dispute? Amazon said that, hey, PayPal, listen, I even don't want to do any dispute cases, right? So if any customer comes to me, I will ask you to complete this. Now, for that particular purpose, payment gateway is storing the numbers at their end. Clear this?
Yes.
Perfect.
So in terms of this, Amazon will be the transmitter, payment gateway can be processor as well as storer. Am I right?
Yes, they do all three.
Ashish, Aditya here.
Yes.
So
Yes,
in the diagram which was shown in the flow, those 4 entities, all 4 blocks need to be actually PCI DSS compliant, right?
Yes. You know, if the regulatory body is saying that yes, you all have to go, then definitely.
And that means essentially you cannot connect to someone who's not PCI DSS compliant, because that will become a source of leak of data, possibly a source of data.
Exactly. Very well said, Aditya ji, because here when let's say the Amazon is connected with PayPal, right? Now you are declaring yourself that, you know, we are transmitting all the data in secure manner, but your PayPal is not certified and anything get leaks from there. So customer will reach to whom? They will reach to the PayPal, to the Amazon, right? Because they don't know who's PayPal. They have entered the data on the Amazon, you know, assuming that they are PCI certified or they are secure.
And moving one step back, you know, when you were showing us the internal environment and the external environment, I'm sorry, I mean the what we call the
CD.
Yeah, the CD. Correct, CD and the non-CD environment. Would it be correct to say that any IP which is actually interacting with this entire flow?
Because they don't know who's PayPal. They have entered the data on the Amazon, you know, assuming that they are PCI certified or they are secure.
And moving one step back, you know, when you were showing us the internal environment and the external environment, I'm sorry, I mean the what we call the
CD.
Yeah, the CD. Correct, CD and the non-CD environment. Would it be correct to say that any IP which is actually interacting with this entire flow actually becomes a part of the
any of the Sri Lankan bank
CD environment? Because whether it is antivirus, I'm assuming it's a server, whether it is Active Directory server, whether it is your you know, your SIM is monitoring. So finally, it's a IP level interaction. So
that is why I have a very you know, special attachment with the forces people. So one step ahead you are thinking, and yes, I'm going to answer that in the next slide, basically, right? So we'll discuss on it, right? So this 2 part is clear, like CD and non-CD.
Yes.
All right. So let's go to the next, which is out of scope. Now here, my first question was there, right? How to reduce the scope, and then I took an example of 10 databases, and then how do we out of scope. So let's say the entity has 100 systems, and with all the permutation, combination and other exercises, we were able to remove those 50 systems from the scope. Now this entity who were actually on the 100 system, now they will be very happy to see that, okay, now our scope is reduced and it is now 50 systems only. So they don't have to worry about the rest systems. Again, it is up to them and best practices. They should keep all those systems secure, but at least from the PCI DSS point of view, their 50 systems will only fall under scope. Now the question is, which system can be out of scope, right? So another gentleman has asked about, you know, all the security systems, will that fall under scope as a non-CD? No, the answer is no. Yes, there are ways where we can move those systems from the scope to out of scope, right? And those are which are not connected to CD directly and which is not impacting the security of it. Okay. And the examples are UAT and development environment. Now there will be a question that what if my UAT environment is connected to the production, which is CD? So now I want to know the answer from you, that what will happen if my development environment is connected to one of the CD systems, what will happen?
It is part of the environment.
It will be the part of the scope.
And as in what?
As a CD.
He by default actually becomes a part of the, I would say, non-CD.
Correct. So here the thing is that directly you cannot say it will be CD and non-CD. The question would be in a different terminology, right? It will ask that, okay, if your development is connected to the CD, does it deal with store, process, and transmit? If your answer is yes, okay, I'll put a one system or one database, yes, then it will be part of your CD environment. And if your answer is no, but you say that yes, it is not dealing with any store, process, and transmit, but it is connected to one of the system which is a part of the CD, then this whole development environment becomes non-CD, right? And that is, again, you have violated the security that your development is connected to the production. And the second thing is that, you have also increased the scope.
Correct.
Right. Now, let's take an example over here. I don't have a lot of questions, but not a lot of assessment per se, but I have some scenarios which is going to be, interesting in terms of discussion and understanding. So I'll take a, again, I will open the paint. Just give me a minute. All right. So let's say this is one entity and we took an example of Amazon, right? Now they have multiple applications, right? App 1, app 2, app 3. Now there is a one database stores card. Okay. Now this application connects to it. This application also connects to it. And this application also connects to this database, right? Now, when you went to the Amazon as an auditor or as a consultant, they said that, see, we have a 3 application, A1, A2, and A3. Now, A1 and A2, which is in yellow and green, they are actually our main applications through which customer can buy anything or customer can utilize. So it means that there is a card number. Right now, this is both are connected to one of the database which stores the card number, and we also have another application which is a A3, but there is no card number at all. And by business, I don't need that card number. Now you say, okay, see, listen, it is connected to CD. He will say, what is CD? Because he is not a QS or he is not an auditor or something. He will say, what is CD? So you will put it into the layman language and you will see that, see, here you are storing the card number, which is becomes critical. Now this application deals this particular database. So there is a risk that this application is connected to it, and that is why we cannot scope out, right? He counters and he said that, listen, this A3 from this database, it is just taking the customer name. It is not taking any card number. It doesn't read any table which has the card number. What will be your opinion in that case? Will you still, keep this in scope, or can it be out of scope because it is not dealing with the card number?
You're asking about A3?
Yes, A3.
A3 is in scope, 100%.
Right. But he says that, it is just taking the customer name from the databases. See, this is how, they, they put you in that way that you will still confuse that, okay, he's right, that, from that particular databases, he's just taking the customer name.
See, Ashish, I'm going one level up. I'm looking at it from a totally different perspective. If he's connected to the network, if that machine gets compromised, he can reach that database, he can encrypt it, he can do a ransomware attack. I'm looking at it from a totally different perspective. So I don't know if this comes under the ambit of PCI DSS or not.
It is. Yes,
that is my
correct, Aditya, and that is where we see the CIA, right? So here, basically, although it is connected to the same database, although it is just taking the customer name, but it is connecting to the same database which also holds the card number. So there are still a high chance that, if something goes wrong to the A3, that will impact, or that might impact the database, right? Now the customer is, the Amazon is very rigid. They say that, no, Ashish, I want to scope out this. You have to tell me, by any chance, I don't want to interrupt my business, but I want to scope out because you said that only those application which does with store, process and transmit of the cardholder data that will fall under scope. Now, why you are taking this A3, which is not dealing at all with any of the card numbers? So I'm not going to, take an opinion or answer because that will, a little bit time taking. I'm running behind. So what I'll do, either I will put a, in between, I will put a one system. So now this database, as this is required only the customer name, put all the detail of customer name over here, right? Now this communication is actually broken. So now A3 will not communicate to this database, which is part of CD. It will just take to this database. Now this database I will put into the non-CD, right? Now you will be thinking that, see, Ashish, you are actually scoping out A3, but again, you are increasing one hop over here, which is again falling under the PCI scope. So what is the use of this putting a customer, middleware in between? The use is that now, apart from A3, if you have any other system, or let's say this A3 is connected to 10 different legs, all will be out of scope. So we have added only one system over here, and our scope will be now this, and this whole, which is at this side, this will be out of scope. Clear this? Or connected to or security impacting systems, which I, bifurcated in three different terms, right? We call it as a non-CD in scope. Some people call it as a non-CD in scope, non-CD out of scope, right? So here will not get confused more. Here we'll use the word CD, non-CD and out of scope. Now here there are other terminology, right? That directly connects impacting the security, or if it is not segmented. So I took the same example of VLAN. So here, let's say again in this also there is an option that with antivirus we have other 10 servers. So those will be also under scope if you're not restricting. System component indirectly connects to CD. So there are certain systems where you say that I don't connect to the CD, but what happens is that through which you are connecting to the CD. Now here you will analyze the risk, and if that is important, then you will take that. So middleware example which we took, or the database example which we took. The system components provide security, which we already discussed, supports, which we already discussed, right? Out of scope is very much clear. The system does not store, process or transmit. System component is not in the same subnet, which we already discussed over here. System component cannot connect to, again, system component does not meet any criteria described above over here, right? So this is this slide which I prepare to explain you in a layman term. Here, what PCI says that this is from the PCI standard itself, right? So Aditya, I think now you are clear with your points which you asked about the IPs which are connected to and all, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Take an example of Amazon, right? So as a consultant or as an auditor, when I go to the entity, so these are the questions normally we check to at least have an idea or have a mindset that how to proceed further. Right now, here you will see some of the interesting factors. Right, the first, we are clear that how many applications store, process, and transmit, how many databases support. We have to list down all the databases, how many servers which does the store, process, transmit. Is there any segmentation? Now, what is this? Is there any segmentation?
That's a VLAN?
Exactly, the network level segmentation, right? Else, let's say if we have a one VLAN and we are saying that production is also having from 192.168 1.1 and my UAT is like 1.10, right? So end of the day, what happens that everything considered as a CD because it falls under the same VLAN, and this is what we discussed over here, right? So segmentation is very important, that you maintain the integrity of that particular data to keep into the a segmented zone, wherein the other communications, even from the non-CD and out of scope, you can restrict. Now here we'll discuss further one slide. I'll show you. Now list of the supporting servers like antivirus, Active Directory and all, which is although do not store the data, but they are supporting it. right? Like providing antivirus, providing patching, providing NTP, providing SIM services, right? Now, this is something which we discussed with that paint, right? I drew it over there about the payment gateway. So this is also when we go to the entity, we ask that, okay, is there anything which you have outsourced? So I'm not sure that how many of are aware about it, but not only in India, across the world, as I said that, I lead the banking and payment gateway group in my organization. So I have almost dealt with all the this APAC countries, starting from Southeast Asia to our subcontinent to Middle East and some of the Eastern Africa countries, right? So what they do, not every bank does everything. So some of the part they outsource. So let's say if I take our example. So let's say you go to the okay, I'll take an international example. So let's say you go to the HSBC, right? So HSBC took all your data and they said that, okay, you will get your card number in next 2 weeks or 3 weeks person, right? Now what they did, they don't want to print the card. So what they will search in the market, that who does the printing on behalf of the banks. So they will go to that entity. That entity say that, yeah, we are with multiple banks and we are doing the card printing and personalization services to the bank. Then this entity will say that, okay, are you certified PCI, blah, blah, blah. A lot of things they will do. They will do their own audit and then they will outsource that to that particular entity. Right? Now it means that all the critical data which belongs to the customer, which are issued by the HSBC, they are sharing with a third party. Right? Now here it means they have outsourced one of the critical services to the one of the third party. Now when I as an assessor go to the HSBC and they for their certification, I have to ask this question, that is there any service which you have outsourced? They will say, yes, I have done, outsourcing of my card personalization. My next question would be whether the entity whom you have, to whom you have outsourced this, are they certified? They will say, yes, they are certified. Then I will ask them, okay, please ask them to provide their certificate, because there is something called attestation of cert. I'll explain that, AOC and ROC, right? So they are allowed, they are bound to share to that entity to whom they are doing a business. So once the HSBC will share that, certificate to me that my outsource organization is PCI certified, then I will be in the relaxed mode in that, yes, they have actually outsourced to the some of the certifying entity. Clear this part? Outsourcing part?
Yes.
And how does that impact the your security? Because let's say if that entity is not certified, then I will say this to entity that your scope will increase. Now I have to verify that particular entity where you have outsourced. Now for that they have to pay, right? We have to travel to that particular zone, and now they don't want to get into it, right? So that is why they have outsourced, because they are PCI certified. So they don't want to produce the card from their end, but they wanted to shift the risk to the third party. Clear? Yeah. So here the third parties are business partner connected to the network, right? So this also became, we should know, right? So here the first thing which we are talking about outsource. Now there is something where we are connected to. So we asked the bank or to the Amazon, right? Let's take example of Amazon, right? So where are you connected to? So they will say that, we are connected to Visa, we are connected to the master, or we are connected to the payment gateway. So that should reflect to their network diagram. So wherever they have a connectivity with the card details, that should reflect, and then they should be able to produce the non-disclosure agreement or due diligence with them, right? So due diligence is very important over here, that any entity, if you are outsourcing or taking any other entity as a business partners, right? So they must do the due diligence for what services they have partners with them, right? Then the point is like the DMG segmentation firewalls. I think we took example. Now inventory is one of the important area. So again, when we do the audit, right? So what happens, like entity doesn't know that which system will be fall under scope or not falling under scope, right? So they produce or they give us the raw inventory which has lot of details. Now when we do the gap assessment or the scoping assessment, then they have to prepare an inventory that which system will actually fall under scope of PCI. Data flow diagram, I just spoke about it, right? So data flow diagram is very important to understand the overall business, right? What is data flow diagram? Data flow diagram is end-to-end flow. So one of the gentlemen asked about the POS scenario, right? So if I take that particular example, or if I take the example of e-commerce, right? So there is one thing where we talk about the external communication. Let me see this. Just 1 second. Okay, so till now we discuss about what? We discuss about the data which is coming to your environment and then it is going to the payment gateway or further to the bank. Now when it comes to the overall services, so we have to see the internal flows as well, right? So let's say there is a customer who's sitting over here. So what they will access if they are accessing Amazon? So they will access the web page of the Amazon, right? Web page means their application, the web application. There only they enter all the details, but at the back end, what happens? It comes to their app server. It comes to their app server. Now app server, it just sends the data to database, right? This is the whole flow of your transaction, right? I'm not going into the external one. I'm going into the internal. So from here, actually, it goes to the payment gateway and all. That is a different thing, right? From there, what we identified, that we identified the outsource entity or the connected entities. But for that particular e-commerce transaction, what is the data flow inside my network? So it goes to the web application, it goes to the web server, it goes to the database, and then reverse. So it means that for this particular e-commerce data flow diagram, if I have to prepare, I have to put all these details. Now when you as an assessor or as an auditor, when you see this, you will understand that okay, yes, web application is also taking a part, app server is also taking a part of it. Clear?
Yes.
So this is what the data flow diagram. If I talk about the POS transaction, which the person who has a sample, so what happened in POS? From the POS, where it will go to the ISP. From ISP, where it will go to the your internal network, right? So till now we talk about the external. Now once it comes to the internal, it will go to your application server. Application server, it will go to the application verifies that the pin which you have entered, whether that is the right pin or not. Then it goes to your core banking, whether you have your money in your account or not, and then traffic goes back. So from there we understood that okay, inside the flow I have a one application server, one database server, there is a one core banking server and all, right? So this is what we call as a data flow diagram. Now, along with all these, this is again if I take from basic ISO or from basic information security, we always talk about PPT, right? People, process, technology.
Yes.
Right. So the person who are dealing with a e-commerce business, the person who is managing the servers, managing the network devices, managing the application databases, people. Technology means those applications, those firewalls, routers, switches, blah, blah, blah. Technology. Process means those e-commerce process or utility payment process. These are the processes that will fall under PCI scope. Split is one, PPT is one, but here there is another part. Remember with this PPTL. So the locations are also falling under scope. So you have one data center. Let's say if I'm talking about the on-prem locations, so the data center you have, and then you have a DR. The application server on the data center, and there is on the DR as well. The firewall is on the data center and the DR. So both ways, if DC is down, the traffic of card data will flow to the DR. So these two locations will fall under PCI scope. Clear? if your data, if your setup is on Amazon or AWS network, right? So that is also as a location. If it is, into the India region or Europe region or Singapore, sorry, Asia, Singapore or Korea region, right? So that particular location will fall under scope. Have you ever encountered with, or have you ever checked that AWS is also PCI certified?
Yes.
Right? But do you think that AWS is actually dealing with a card number?
Not sure. Sir, every cloud is PCI certified, sir.
Not every client, but yes, most of. Even you will surprise. There are some data center is also certified, PCI certified. Now tell me that. Do you think that data center stores card number?
It's a processing has been done through the data centers. Devices like databases are about.
Yeah,
but
it is
they are
required.
not taking care of.
No. See, data center is a colo service. It gives you the location. Data still belongs to the entity. So whatever server, application or router, switches, everything that belongs to the entity. What data center gives you? It will give you the rack. It will give you the room. It will give you the AC. They are not storing. You are storing in your servers or in your database. That is where actually, this is the interesting part of it, right? Let's see data.
Database is storing under rack servers only, right?
Yes.
Where database is reside.
They just provide you the rack. They just provide you the room.
Correct. The room is just not a simple room, right? It is having a set of systems. The systems contains the database. Because if the DRY we are using like a data business continuity purpose, assume that one primary location gets stuck somewhere, fire or whatever, immediately business will not stop.
Correct. But who's the owner of the data?
Of course, owner is the entity only. The high level is entity only. I understand. But still, when, for example, like if I comes to the data pseudonymization, what are the concept, like the CVV number or a card expiry data, maybe they are storing in different places and different databases, or in the same database with some encryption somewhere. But ultimately, the rack server which having the database with a physical location, maybe some different place, belong to entity. At the entity level only, with the certification will happen that.
Right. So let me, yes, Kiran, I'm sorry, you were saying something, and Aditya also you were saying something.
On the same grounds as Venkat was saying, if the third party, if the bank has like the example that you were telling about the bank, if the bank has provided its services to third party, and the third party is maintaining the data in the data center, then whose responsibility is this? Is it like third party entity or the bank or the data center itself? I mean.
Yes, Aditya ji, your question.
So it's related to what.
Sorry, you are on mute. You are on mute.
Yes. So what I was saying is that adding to what Kiran was saying. So I'm okay. As per regulations, I'm not very sure whether there is a mandate that it has to be on-prem, where this data has to be kept, or it is in the cloud. But I mean, if we look at the three things, so there is infrastructure as a service, right? Platform as a service, and software as a service. In infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, yes, data responsibility is mine. But if it is software as a service, data responsibility is of the service provider. I mean, that is my basic understanding. But of course, I think there are rules and regulations which will clearly mandate how this data is to be stored.
Right. So here, let's take a question. So let me try to explain. And if you guys have another thought process, please let me know as well. So let's say there is a data center. Okay. So I have a one system which holds the data, right? So what I did, I asked to one of the entity that, hey, can you just keep my server at your location? Or let's say, some of you are providing the data center services. So what I'll say that, okay, I want to place my system at your place. Now, as a part of agreement or due diligence, what we do is that, what I want a 24 hours power. In case if there is a power outage, then you must have a power backup, right? You must have the proper connectivity, so we can, from our office, we can connect to you. Connect to you means connect to our server, right? And we can replicate the data. In this whole process, if data center is just providing a colo, right? So there are some data center who providing the shared hosting services, or they're also providing some other services, right? I'm not talking about those data centers as a just a normal data center who provides the colo locations, right? So they will say that, okay, I will give you assurance that if something goes wrong, now here the wrong means what? Someone
Compromise.
is doing the, no. Compromise of data is a different. Stolen of the device, right? Because what I'm providing you the physical security. Physical security means that if the rack is open, right? So someone comes and they open your cable, they just plug out the cable. So that type of services they are providing. But if you are saying to them, you make sure that my data is there, no one actually steal the data. They will say, see, I don't care what is inside into your server, because I do not have access to those servers, right? They are not owner of the data. They are just owner of that particular colo location. So they are providing what? They are providing you the CCTV, they are providing you the ISP connectivity, they are providing you the fire extinguisher and other things, right? They are not at all dealing with the data. Now there are certain service providers or the data center service providers, what they do that, okay, hey, we have a multiple, entities, but whenever you go to your system, we call them, shared hosting provider, right? So shared hosting provider is that through my firewall, whenever you go to your database or your system, you have to cross through my firewall. So in that cases, they are responsible for that particular firewall and rules. But again, once you cross their firewall, what is happening inside to your environment, it is all your lookout. Right? Now, why they go for PCI DSS is just to have more business. Right? What they are trying to tell you that, hey, we are PCI DSS certified. It means that the basic things, what PCI ask about it, we are following it. We have a CCTV, we have an access badge, we are storing the CCTV logs in the a particular time, whatever PCI says. So in terms of when I'm going for a bank and I ask that, hey, let's go and visit your data center and DR. So bank will say that, Ashish, why, do you really need? Because my DC and DR are PCI certified. So I say, oh, really? If you are PCI certified, can you please share the, certificate? Once they will share the certificate, I will not go to their location and I will not see all these things, because from their AOC itself, they are ensuring that, we are PCI certified. It means that we are following the physical security of it. I hope that is giving you some sense why what I'm talking about over here. Right? Yes. Now, Aditya ji, you have mentioned about infrastructure as a services, platform as a services, and software as a services. Over here as well, whenever you go to any cloud, you go and ask them, there is some responsibility matrix which they prepare between the entity and the cloud service provider. Right? So what happens in that CSP, they, what they call it as a cloud service provider responsibility matrix, they call it.
Shared responsibility model. Shared responsibility model.
Yes. Yeah. So that's right. So here what they will say that, okay, for this particular thing, if, let's say if it is about patching, so I'm providing you this services, so it is my responsibility. Okay. But the data which is inside it, the encryption on the data, it is all your responsibility. Now, let's say if AWS is saying that, hey, entity X or Amazon, you know what? I'm also providing the encryption services. So I will give you one storage which is already encrypted. Right? So I cannot directly, trust. Right? The trust is, there is no trust, right? So we have to ask, okay, can you show your certificate? And can you tell me whether your service which you are talking about, the encryption service, whether that is certified or not? If they are able to show me that yes, they are certified, it means then only I can opt that service, else I will say no. Thank you very much. Now, Kiranji, sorry, I missed your question. I tried to answer, but I think little bit I'm out of track for your question. Can you repeat your question, or if it is answered, please let me know.
No, you partially answered it. I was saying if a nation has provided its services to a third party, and a third party is like hosting the data in the data center, whose responsibility is it? That's what I was asking. And
It's a
you
third
answered
party.
it, I think. Yeah.
Fine. So I think we are good for today's session.